Hello everyone. Welcome back to the channel. Enjoy the fanfic, and let's begin part 2. Having heard their mission, as unexpected for Naruto as it was, he, Fu, and Uzumaki had returned to the apartment to pick their clothes for what they figured to be a maximum of a month mission. The three had quickly settled into their shared bedroom. I will get your clothes ready, master. Is there anything I should pick out? Uzumaki asked. Naruto's first instinct was to tell her he would do it himself, but he did remember that he said he would try to make an effort to, at least be sensible about this new role of his. Forget about that, Uzumaki-san. I got that on my own, but we're going to need supplies for the mission, so I guess you can prepare any food or snacks to bring while Fu-san packs up the shinobi tools, Naruto said. Uzumaki quickly nodded with a bow and moved without question into the kitchen. At the same time, Fu opened one of the closets that her master had dubbed the shinobi closet, and pulled out what she assumed they would need on the mission. In general, unless the master permitted it, slaves weren't supposed to have weapons, especially not around said master. The temptation was usually much too great for any slave to not try to attempt an assassination of their master in a vain attempt at freedom. However, Naruto had told Fu and Uzumaki that they would be allowed to defend themselves, so that was an order, more or less, that they were permitted to have weaponry. With that in mind, Fu quickly settled the backpacks on the bed before she moved on to some other duties while Naruto placed his clothes into one of his scrolls. He then readied his backpack. He wouldn't lie. He was looking forward to going to another village, even if it did ruin his off time. He did wonder what Sunagaku was like. Having learned about the 5 great shinobi nation in the academy, Naruto of course knew that Suna had sand. Lots of sand. While Naruto wasn't exactly looking forward to the journey, he figured it was at best not going to be a long stay. Kakashi had told them to be ready to leave by nightfall. He had also told them to pack for a minimum of 3 weeks to a maximum of a month and a half. Naruto was sure that wasn't very hard to do. But 2 hours had passed by before Uzumaki gently knocked on the door before she opened it. Master, I have prepared the food. Fu-san is washing the dishes. Is there anything else we need? Uzumaki asked as Naruto finished just in time to place his backpack on the floor. Naruto turned his head to face the former Iwa Kunoichi before he allowed his thoughts to wander for a moment. Well, we already got our equipment from the store a couple of days ago. I guess we should head to bed now. We're going to be traveling at night time, so I think that would be best, Naruto said. Uzumaki gave a nod in the form of a bow before she closed the door. Naruto watched her go before he picked up a few more things that he figured they would need. Naruto was surprised that after 20 minutes, Fu and Uzumaki came through the door, ready to go to bed. One might ask, how a bundle of energy like Uzumaki Naruto could ever think about sleeping when he felt excited at the prospect of seeing another village. Well, Naruto was sure the village wasn't going anywhere. He also doubted that there was anything more urgent that they needed to do, so with that being said, Naruto didn't have much of a reason to be up. So, the Uzumaki residence was quiet as Naruto, Uzumaki and Fu slept. The sun passed over the sky in its daily routine. The hours passed away as the sun settled on just leaving the horizon. Naruto groaned as he, Uzumaki, and Fu got up. Everyone quickly got dressed and picked up their bags. Are you okay, master? You're shivering, Fu said. Uzumaki turned and she as well noticed Naruto's hand had begun to jitter. Naruto just nervously chuckled. Why yeah, just fine. It's my first time going to one of the 5 great nations. I guess I'm just excited, Naruto said, offering a small smile. Uzumaki blinked in surprise. His first time to one of the 5 great nations. Back in Iowa, Uzumaki had a mission to go to Kumo as her 3rd mission going straight of the academy. She wasn't quite sure on her master's record for missions, but to have this be the first one out of the elemental nations, it was a surprise to say that least. Perhaps Konoha and Iowa were more different than Uzumaki had thought. Have either of you been to Suna before? Naruto asked. Fu shook her head. She had been relatively isolated in Tataki. She was lucky to even go to some of the neighboring countries at times. For her own reply, Uzumaki had shook her head as well. I haven't been to Sunagaku before, master, but I have been to other nations when I was a kunoichi of Iowa, Uzumaki said. The 3 fell into an awkward silence for a brief moment. It must have hurt all 3 of them, to learn of the burdens placed on them as they realized the cold reality of being a master and being a slave. What was it like? Iwa and your team, I mean, Naruto asked as he opened the door. Uzumaki and Fu walked out with Naruto locking the door. The three made it to the staircase as Uzumaki gave a short chuckle. Iwa was homely master. It was surrounded by many mountains. As academy students we were taught the mountain climbing exercise. The mountains were very steep so you needed good chakra control in order to traverse its many segments. As for my team, well they were my older and younger brothers. They were idiots, but I always did enjoy working with them even if they got on my last nerves sometimes, Uzumaki said. Naruto just nodded. He had no idea that Uzumbaki's teammates were also her family members. This news only seemed to make Naruto even angrier about the circumstances. As an orphan he never had a family and he always wanted one. Naruto couldn't imagine tearing someone else away from their family members. Oh, Naruto remarked. Uzumaki noticed her master's look and sighed. Well he did ask, but Uzumaki could see that her story had probably affected him as much as it did her. It's fine master. If I know those two then they are taking care of themselves, Uzumaki said with a small grin. That grin don't really help Naruto that much, but it did make him feel a little better. However Naruto highly doubted Uzumaki was as confident as she sounded. He knew about putting up tough fronts. There was no way Uzumaki wasn't missing her family. She had been in this master-slave world long enough to be even remotely content in what she was saying, but it wasn't like Naruto wanted to make her uncomfortable so he didn't speak further on it. What about you Fu-san? What was Taki like for you? Naruto asked. He could see Fu's glare at the ground. Naruto suddenly widened his eyes as he thought back for a single moment. I have nothing to say to anyone from Taki SSU, master, Fu muttered out. Naruto turned and could see the hatred in her eyes and the contempt for Taki. Obviously Taki was probably the reason she was in this situation in the first place. He didn't like hearing them call him master, and he could order them to stop, but that wouldn't change the situation or their dynamic. Oh, sorry. I thought it was a good idea, Naruto replied. Fu shook her green hair. It is not master's fault, Fu said. Naruto just thanked her before he led them into the hotel. If master believes I should say something to Taki, then I will SSU. However master, when you asked me last night how I felt, I still feel the same. I have nothing to say to Taki, Fu said. Sakura and Sasuke could hear the ice in her tone as could Kakashi. Betrayal from one's village could do that to a person. Naruto just nodded a little sadly. I see, Naruto said. Fu merely nodded. In a word master, Taki was simply prison SSU, Fu said as the three kept walking. Everywhere I walked, I felt like I was walking on eggshells with anyone there. Just the slightest misstep from me and I was sure that something like this would have happened. I guess I didn't walk softly enough. For me master, being your slave, is better than Taki, Fu said as Naruto stiffened. Having her freedom restricted, her rights taken away, being treated as property, being given to the whims of someone else, was better than living in Taki. Naruto couldn't understand it. Oh sure he was sure that her being like him then she had a rough life and she knew the hard times, but Naruto couldn't stop himself as he turned around and grabbed Fu's shoulders, surprising her. I will treat you better. I swear I will treat you better than Taki ever did Dadbao. I swear it on my life Fu. Please, don't think of me as your prison, Naruto said. Fu didn't speak as she held her head down. Uzumaki quietly watched the exchange between master and slave. Hi master. I don't think you're that kind of person SSU, Fu remarked. Naruto just settled for a nod of his head as he took his hands from Fu's shoulders. The three continued on their way through the streets. It hadn't taken their group long to make it to the large doors of Konoha where they noticed Sasuke and Sakura patiently waiting for them. Hey Sakura, Sasuke, any idea what we're supposed to be delivering? Naruto asked. Sasuke craned his neck as he gave a sigh. Well, it's not like Kakashi gave us any other information regarding this mission. You would know that if you probably remembered to pay attention loser, Sasuke said with his arms folded and his eyes closed. Naruto's eyebrow twitched and he was sure that he was straining his knuckles, but the blonde had made a silent oath to himself that he would not let Sasuke get under his skin, no matter how infuriating the asshat was at times. Gee, thanks for the info, Tem, Naruto remarked. Sakura leaned herself up from the wall. Naruto, we're going to be meeting Kakashi-sensei in a couple of minutes. Would it kill you to not antagonize for once? Sakura asked, slightly irritated. Naruto turned to look to Sakura for a moment before a small frown appeared on his face. Naruto gave himself a deep sigh. So, Naruto, Fu and Uzumaki took their places as the team waited for their sensei who had the notorious habit for being late. As one could expect, this situation was no different. The hue of the sunset was gone from the horizon as the moon settled. Fu found herself as she kicked a small stone across the dirt. Master, does your sensei always do this? Fu asked. She slightly jumped when Naruto's slightly annoyed look turned to her. Naruto took a moment to observe her posture and eased himself enough to answer her question. He slumped his shoulders. Yeah, and then he always makes up this lame excuse for being late before we leave. Get used to it, cause I have a feeling he gets like this with everyone he meets, Naruto said. Fu merely blinked, but she gave a nod. She turned to Uzumaki to see the former Iwa Kunoichi giving a hard sigh. You have a very traditional sensei, master, Uzumaki said. Naruto rubbed the back of his head and groaned. Was that what they called it? Finally, with anger that could fuel the flames of Hades for all eternity, the young members of Team 7 could see their sensei coming through the darkness. He walked up as nonchalantly as Fu and Uzumaki remembered him walking when they were back in Taki. He appeared before the group. I'm not late, am I? Kakashi asked with a smile. What sensei is late by 3 hours? You've always been late by 2. Are you trying to break some new record now? Naruto asked. Kakashi's only response was to give another chuckle. He turned and noticed Sasuke and Sakura glaring at him harshly. Ah, the joys of being a jonin to a bunch of brats. Mama, just think of it as learning patience on an important stakeout mission which could take hours or even days. You wouldn't want the enemy hearing you, now would you? Kakashi asked. Naruto would have very much liked to retort against that, but he couldn't since Kakashi could have been right. What was worse was that Naruto was sure that Kakashi was trying to make this point with that damn eye smile of his. That still doesn't change the point that you were late, sensei. Sakura hissed a little quieter since it was night time. Kakashi shrugged his shoulders. Well, punctuality and all that requires that I attend. Well, shall we be going now? He asked. Sasuke leaned himself up from the wall. Hold on. You haven't even told us what we're delivering, escorting. What are you hiding? Sasuke asked with a suspicious gaze. Kakashi stared at Sasuke for a moment before the Jonin sighed. Well, as your commanding officer, it is at my sole judgment to reveal to you the contents of the mission, Sasuke. You should be happy I'm so willing to share. We're delivering a letter to the Council of Suna. Given that this is a C-rank mission, then I think we all know what to expect. So, shall we get a move on? Kakashi asked. Team 7 nodded as they left the village with Fu and Uzumaki in tow. The travel at night wasn't as thrilling as Naruto figured. If anything, since his days with Zabuza and Haku, he had been a little wary of the dark. Really, he wished he had a mobile hobby that he could take him with, much like Kakashi's reading of books, but would you really expect Uzumaki Naruto to pick up a book? Not. Oh yeah, Naruto. While we're walking, you might as well catch up on reading these slave laws that the Sandaime gave me, Kakashi said with a smile as he held out a rather large book. Oh irony, you could go suck a dango stick. Naruto grumbled as he took the book from Kakashi. He groaned at its weight. There was no way he was going to be able to read a book that felt like it took all his damn strength to lift, with both hands. I know it might seem like a lot, but at least be knowledgeable, Naruto. You can't remain ignorant of these things, especially not with Suna. While the village doesn't have the strictest slaves laws, it still can be a hard place if you are unprepared, Kakashi said. Naruto turned to Kakashi, as did Sasuke and Sakura. Fu and Uzumaki didn't speak. Like what kind of laws? Sakura asked. Kakashi could tell she was a little unsure of wanting to know the answer to her question, and if Kakashi were truthful, then he would have found himself hesitating in actually telling her. Well, for one, all slaves in Suna need to be branded with a mark of ownership. Konoha grants a little bit of leeway with this law, as does Kurigakure, but Suna is probably second to Iwa in keeping this law strict. You might not see it on the visible parts of their bodies, but any slave you happen to see in Suna will be branded with a symbol of their master, Kakashi said. Naruto turned and noticed that while Uzumaki looked uneasy, Fu was actually shivering in her walk. He gave a hard frown. And what about slaves from other nations? Naruto asked. All sets of eyes turned to him, but Naruto's eyes never left Kakashi's. The Jonin looked at his student for a brief moment before turning an eye to his blonde student's slaves. They were looking at Naruto in only something that could be described as disbelief, and yet there was probably also some measure of comfort in their eyes. Well, slaves by other masters from other nations are a little different. In your case, Naruto, you would be allowed to brand your slaves if you wanted, which I doubt you'll do to your own, but you will be required to pay a fee for them to enter in Sunagaku. Anything they do, anything they break, anyone they say something mean to, accident or not, will fall on you, Naruto. They are your property, thus it's your responsibility to maintain them, Kakashi said. Naruto felt like his throat was a little dry at these words. Kakashi didn't mean to scare his student, but this was the reality of the situation. You have need to worry, master. Fu-san and I will make sure to remain on our best behavior. We will not dishonor the face of our master, Uzumaki said. Naruto stared at her for a time before he turned to Fu. She offered him a soft smile and a nod. She wouldn't do anything to drag her master's name through the dirt. At least not after the attributed kindness, despite the situation, he had given them. Naruto smiled. He supposed that was good enough. He trusted the two to keep their word. I know you guys won't. I promised that I would treat you both right, Dadbao. No one's touching you so long as I've got a say in it. Naruto said with a thump of his chest. Uzumaki couldn't stop the light chuckle that escaped her lips, but Fu was a bit more expressive as she had her hand over her mouth to stop her chuckles. Kakashi shook his head as he watched the three interact. They looked like they would be just fine. So with that out of the way, Team 7 continued through the darkness and on their way towards the village hidden in the sand. Their footsteps on the dirt path were blown away by the wind of the night air as the day's events ended. Allow me to wash your plates, master, Fu said as Team 7 finished their breakfast by their campfire. Thanks, Fu-san, Naruto said, handing his dishes to the green-haired Jinchuriki. Fu quickly walked to a nearby stream that she had seen the team pass by. Everyone also watched as Uzumaki furl up Naruto's sleeping bag and seal it back into a scroll before she placed it back into his backpack. She then busied herself with packing hers and Fu's sleeping bags. Naruto had been kind enough to buy them some in a local town that they had passed 3 days ago. It had been a week and a half since their journey to Suna. They were currently somewhere in the land of rivers. At least that was when Sakura had asked where they were, which prompted Kakashi to pull out his map. So far the mission was a little boring, but it wasn't like Uzumaki was direly hoping for anything to happen. You ask Uzumaki how she felt at being a slave right now, well, she hated it. She wouldn't deny it still. Sometimes she did think about just taking a kunai and ending her master's life and the lives of his teammates. She hated sometimes that she had to pretend to be okay with everything, but she knew it wasn't Naruto's fault. Constantly Uzumaki found herself arguing against the things she thought. It wasn't like she didn't appreciate what Naruto had tried to do, a little naive as it was, but it was a lot more than anyone would have truly tried to do for her. She occasionally had dreams of Naruto's tears when he was offered the chains that bound hers and Fu's body. Sure, Uzumaki didn't see him in the best light, but, okay fine, maybe his words had affected her a little bit. What could she do? None of them asked for this. Uzumaki, said girl gasped as she stood to her feet and turned to see Naruto looking at her a little worried. Sorry master, I was thinking. Is something wrong? Uzumaki asked. Naruto turned his head. She had hoped that he wouldn't think she was slighting him in any way. Nothing wrong. I was just asking if you had all your stuff packed. Kakashi-sensei said that we're moving out in 10 minutes, Naruto said. Uzumaki looked around the campsite and noticed Sakura and Sasuke packing their own bags along with Kakashi, who was quietly waiting for his genin to finish. Hi, I'll be ready soon, Uzumaki said. Naruto didn't buy into her speak, but he let it go. Maybe she was nervous about the trip to Suna. He wasn't sure. Pretty soon, Fu returned with Naruto's dishes and he packed those away as the rest of Team 7 got together. Getting a little cozy with your new life, Dobi? Sasuke asked with a small smirk. Naruto turned a light glare to his teammate. No, Naruto was not enjoying this life at all. Whatever, Tem. I would ask if that was jealousy I was hearing, but this isn't anything to be jealous about. I hate this, Naruto said with a light snarl that surprised even Sasuke. Sakura and Kakashi looked at him for a moment. Didn't look that way to me. Looked like you enjoyed having two girls ordered around, Sakura said with a fold of her arms. Naruto's eyebrow twitched before he turned to Sakura. I didn't ask for this, you know. But Fu-san and Uzumaki-san seemed to be willing to put up with the situation, so how would it look if I was just the one to complain about everything? I swore to them I would treat them right and I'm going to do that. What's your problem anyway, Sakura? You've been on my case ever since this whole thing happened. Naruto claimed. Sakura gawked as she reviewed over Naruto's words. She didn't forget that it was mainly her fault that Naruto was in this situation. She knew she couldn't blame him for it entirely, but they were slaves. Literally people with no rights. No, they weren't even people. They were objects, things. Perhaps Sakura was just worried that what happened to Fu and Uzumaki would happen to her. Seeing that Sakura wasn't keen on talking, Kakashi cleared his throat. Well, I'm sure it's just taking us all some getting used to. That's all. I wouldn't expect us to be comfortable with this so easily. Now then, shall we get a move on? Kakashi asked. Naruto and Sasuke nodded. Sakura just quietly moved to her things and picked them up. Fu handed Naruto his backpack. He gratefully took it before the team continued on their journey. It had taken another 2 days before the Konoha team finally, and Naruto means finally, saw anything resembling a desert. Naruto wasn't about to lie, he couldn't understand how the hell anyone could live out in this land. It was hotter than hot, there wasn't a place for water for miles, and he was sure there was a giant mushroom in the vast distance of the desert that he could have seen at one point. Naruto wiped the sweat from his brow. Kami, it was hot. Would you like some water, master? Fu asked. Naruto turned and noticed Fu holding out her water bottle to him. Naruto just grinned. Thanks, Fu-san, but I'm alright. Can't be wasting the water we already have, Naruto said. Fu just nodded before she placed her water bottle back in her pouch. Fu wasn't going to lie, just seeing the sweat drop from her master's face continued to tell her that this heat was more than she had anticipated. Oh come now, Naruto. It can't be that bad, Kakashi said, earning a glare, albeit a more subdued one from Fu and Uzumaki, from everyone when he said that. Sakura felt gross from the sweat that was on her pink blouse. Sasuke took another swig of his water bottle. The cooling drink refreshed his throat for a couple of moments until he forced his lips away from the bottle in order to conserve what he could. See, the reason everyone was glaring at Kakashi was because the man wasn't even sweating. He had even more clothes on than they did. How the hell wasn't he hot? He had a mask over his face, for crying out loud. Noticing his students and their stares, he grinned behind his mask. Well, it's lucky that we came during this time when it's not really windy. Imagine how slow our pace would be if we had a sandstorm, Kakashi said. Everyone shivered at the thought. And just imagine all the dangerous animals under the sand just waiting to devour us whole if we so much as take one unneeded step. We could be walking to our deaths right now, Kakashi said with another grin. Master, can I poison his meal? Uzumaki asked into Naruto's ear. By Kami himself, Naruto was really debating Uzumbaki's question, especially when he heard Kakashi giggling to himself. Team 7 continued through their treks through the desert as Kakashi suddenly got a fascination with the many morbid things that could potentially happen to the group on their way to Sunagaku. Truly, the limits of Naruto's patience were tested. They were so tested, he thought he was dreaming when he saw a tall wall in the distance. I spy with my little eye the illusion of a wall, Datbao. It's probably like that giant mushroom we passed some time ago, Naruto said with a groan. Fu looked up and blinked. Either Master and I are having the same illusion, or that really is a wall, SSU. Fu said. Naruto rubbed his eyes, as did Sakura and Sasuke. Uzumaki smiled. Freakin' finally. Kakashi was the only one who didn't share in the joy. He had lost his amusement for the trip. Oh well, they all had to return to Konoha at some point. As Team 7 came up to Sunagaku, Naruto couldn't help but admire the large stone walls as they got bigger and bigger, no doubt forming a large wall around the village like a protective natural landscape. A part of Naruto was a tad nervous at the idea of heading into Sunagaku, especially after learning what Kakashi had told him about the village, but he would just have to make the best of the situation. He would have to do so not just for himself, but also for Fu and Uzumaki. He would protect them both. He had sworn it. As Naruto and the rest of Team 7 came up to the entrance of Sunagaku, they were instantly met with two Sunagaku Chunin decked out in their village's colors of light and dark brown vests. Halt. State your business here, the Chunin said in a gruff, hard voice. Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura quickly pulled themselves to a stop while Fu and Uzumaki made their attempts to not be as profound as they probably looked. Kakashi quickly asserted himself and cleared his throat. Team 7 from Konohagakure. Genin Uzumaki Naruto, Haruno Sakura, and Uchiha Sasuke under Hatake Kakashi. We are here on a delivery mission to the Council of Suna, Kakashi stated. The two Chunin glanced at each other. The one at the right suddenly turned his eyes and noticed Fu and Uzumaki of the little group. Fu shrunk beneath the man's gaze. Truth be told, Uzumaki wasn't feeling expressly confident either. And those two, what is their purpose? The one at the right asked, pointing his gaze to Fu and Uzumaki. Kakashi followed his gaze and landed on them for just a moment before he turned to Naruto. Naruto took a step forward. They are with me. They're my slaves, Naruto nearly croaked out. Just saying that still felt him with an uncomfortable urge to vomit, but he had to get it over with. The two Chunin blinked for a brief moment before the one to the left held out his hand. Show us your master seal, he said. Naruto quickly obeyed and held up his right hand, which showed the seal. Whether by organization or not, every master seal by slave organization was different. There were those from cheap organizations and others from highly priced organizations. One could imagine both Chunin and their surprise when they looked at Naruto's seal. The Crescent Sun. How could a boy, a genin no less, afford slaves from that organization? The Chunin asked himself before he pulled back. Slave papers, he said, holding out his hand. Naruto quickly rummaged through his backpack. Kakashi had heavily advised to Naruto that he always keep those papers on his person wherever he went. They were just as authentic and legal as his seal was. It was a good thing Naruto had taken that to heart. Is it really that big of a deal if he doesn't have the papers? Sakura asked. Kakashi sighed. Unfortunately it is. While his master seal is the real deal, I'm sure that Suna would be a bit stricter on his slaves if he didn't have those papers. Those papers are a good identifier of who is being led into the village and under what pretenses. I imagine the tax for Naruto to have his slaves in Suna would be a lot higher than what he will get now, Kakashi said. Sakura shivered as Sasuke watched the interaction. Fu and Uzumaki were quiet during the exchange. Naruto quickly produced his papers and showed them to the Chunin. The man looked them over before handing them to his partner. Both looked them over before they nodded and handed the papers back to Naruto. There is a tax for letting foreign slaves in Sunagaku. 10,000 ryo per slave, he said. Naruto widened his eyes, as did Sakura. What? That's not fair, Sakura said, but Kakashi quickly stopped her with a hand on her shoulder. This isn't Konoha, Sakura. This is Sunagaku and it's their laws and their rules. We can only comply, Kakashi said. Sakura simmered down and frowned as Naruto just looked at the two-guard before pulling out his wallet. It's not like 20,000 ryo was going to be much of a dent against him from the money he had robbed of that guy he struck back in Taki. Let them take it. Naruto hoped they choked on the money. The men counted the bills before putting them away. Having your slaves unattended in another village is usually uncommon for slave masters. Would you like them branded? He asked. Naruto wasn't sure, but something in the way the man at the right said that had made him uneasy. Almost as if he was looking forward to Naruto's acceptance. Well, Naruto wasn't about to give him the satisfaction. No, I don't need them branded. I trust they'll be fine on their own, Naruto said, turning back to Fu and Uzumaki, a small smile his easing of their worries. Fu and Uzumaki only gave small smiles and bows in return. The Chunin merely snorted. Yeah, all right, brat. Just know that if they cause any trouble, then you're in trouble as their master. Other than that, you may enter Konoha Shinobi, the Chunin said. Kakashi quickly thanked the Chunin as Naruto made his way back. Are you okay, master? Fu asked. Naruto just smiled. Just tired, Dadbayo. Naruto remarked back. It was true. Between the walk and that talk just then, Naruto already felt worn out from the day. Well, you're in luck, Naruto. We'll be staying for a little while. I'm sure you'll get your rest, Kakashi said. Naruto snorted a reply as the team walked through the narrow corridor of Suna's walls before finally entering the village. Kakashi could honestly say he was amused at the looks of awe on his team's face. Not even Fu and Uzumaki could hide some form of surprise from their faces. They watched people walk through the village hidden in the sand. Don't let any sand get caught in your mouths, you five, Kakashi said. The genin and slaves closed their mouths, a little embarrassed to be caught that way. Naruto looked over the village. It was definitely sandy, but the way that they had sand sculptures for houses was actually rather interesting in Naruto's eyes. He couldn't understand how so many people could wear that hot clothing, but he was sure it was because they were accustomed to this arid temperature. So what do we do now, Kakashi-sensei? Sakura asked. Kakashi gave a light smile. Well, first we go check into our hotel and then we do our mission. Now we are in another village, so let's try to keep a professional attitude and represent our village well, Kakashi said. Sasuke snorted while Naruto rolled his eyes. Sakura just groaned to herself. No one believed the Jonin's words at all. But who were they to complain? It was odd how fast they were able to grab a hotel and get their stuff settled. Well, perhaps for Naruto it was better to say that Fu and Uzumaki got his stuff settled, though he had tried to tell both that they would do it together. Naruto could only sigh. Sometimes he wondered if Uzumaki and Fu were doing this on purpose just to mess with him. Unfortunately, Naruto couldn't enjoy the Suna experience for very long as Kakashi gathered Team 7 together to go to the Council of Suna. Naruto could only groan. This wasn't as exciting as he hoped it would be, but he quickly let it go. Leaving, master? Fu asked as Naruto opened the door. He gave a nod. Yeah, we're gonna complete the mission and go to the council. I'll be back soon. I guess you guys can do what you want until I get back. I think I'll be gone for maybe an hour or two. Just be careful, okay, guys? Naruto asked. Fu and Uzumaki nodded. Both bowed as Naruto waved a goodbye and then closed the door. So, what now? Fu asked. Uzumaki turned. I guess we're free for right now. We could look around. When I was in Iowa, I often heard that Suna has some good books. I guess I can find something to read, Uzumaki said. Fu blinked and she openly groaned. She hated reading. It was so boring. Uzumaki grinned at Fu's mood. And what do you like? Uzumaki asked, placing her hands on her hips. Fu pouted. Movies SSU, she said a little sheepishly. Uzumaki rolled her eyes. She supposed they could stop by a video store if they really needed to as well. Meanwhile, Naruto finally caught up with his team. Kakashi-sensei, you said that we should anticipate being away for a while, but other than our walk here it's been rather uneventful. Why are we staying in Suna if we're just making a delivery? Sakura asked. Kakashi turned to her. Well, this is to the Council of Suna after all. I would imagine that they will hand us a reply to give back to our own council. Also, we have to wary of the way back as well. We were fortunate to not come across any problems on our way over here, Kakashi said with a smile. Sasuke gave a hard glare. One that Naruto easily noticed. This is a C rank mission. What should we have been concerned about? Sasuke asked. Naruto supposed that was true. The mission was actually easy by the last couple of missions. If his team's track record for having a mission more difficult than the rank said it was, could have been anything to go by. Kakashi only gave a small smile. Well, if our last mission was anything to go by, then there is actually a lot we need to be concerned about. But maybe our luck is finally beginning to take shape, Kakashi said. Naruto snorted. Yeah, right. Naruto and his team, with some time, had made it to the Cage mansion. Stop right there. Who are you and what do you want with Cage-sama? A man asked from the side. Kakashi quickly came up to him. We have a deliver for the Council of Suna from Konoha, Kakashi said, holding up the letter. The man narrowed his eyes at the Konoha shinobi for a moment. Naruto took the moment to observe the man. He was a very tall man. He had two distinctive, red markings on the right side of his face, the only visible part of his head, with the rest being covered by his turban-like headgear and by a sheet hanging from it on the left side of his face. He donned the standard attire of a Suna nin, complete with a forehead protector and flak jacket like Naruto had seen many of the other shinobi in this area dress. Naruto could tell somehow. He didn't know how, but he could tell. This man was on Kakashi's level, perhaps a par or two below it, but Naruto could feel the man's strength. Naruto didn't know it, but the same could have been said for Sasuke. He was staring at the man a little harder than he perhaps intended. He could feel a strange chakra radiating from the man. Perhaps Suna wasn't as weak as his father had told him about those couple of times. This man was the real deal. Just like Zabuza was. Foreign shinobi are not permitted to be without an escort. I will deliver the letter to the council. You can be on your way, the man said with a small glare. Kakashi met him with a glare of his own, albeit a bit more lighthearted. The glare on the man's face only hardened at Kakashi's gave way to a small chuckle. I apologize, but I can't take you up on your offer. My instructions were to either give this your cage or your council. No one lesser, Kakashi said with a grin though the man couldn't see it. The frown on his face deepened in such a way that Sakura almost took a step back out of habit. The man stared at her for a moment before he turned back to Kakashi. Master Baki, there you are. Team 7 and the man named Baki turned and noticed a boy about Naruto's age running up to the man. Naruto blinked at the boy's tone before turning back to see Baki's light glare. What do you want? I thought I told you not to address like that in public, Baki said with a sharp glare that made the boy cringe. Gee Gomen, Master Baki, but, Tamari-sama asked that I get you. She said that you were late, the boy said. Baki really a hard sigh. Naruto and the rest of his team seemed bewildered. Baki turned to the boy. Good, you did your job, now go back to the house and tend to the place. Also quit calling me master. Baki said a little more harder. The young boy shrunk beneath Baki's gaze before he bowed. Hi. Gomen Baki-sama. I will take my leave, the boy said before he turned and ran off. The team watched him go before Sakura turned to the Suna Jonin. Hey, you didn't have to be so mean to your own son. What did he do to you? Sakura asked with a hard huff. Her strength in her question didn't last very long as Baki probably gave her the hardest look she had ever received in her life. He's not my son and it doesn't matter how I treat my slaves. I will escort you to Kazekage-sama. Follow me, he said. Sakura's words died in her throat as Baki made his way to the Kazekage mansion. Naruto shivered at those words. This Suna Jonin was a slave master. He turned his head to the right and noticed the small image of the boy in the distance. He was a slave. You didn't have to talk to him like that. Like, he wasn't even human. You didn't have to belittle him. Naruto snarled out, which earned a slight pause from Baki. Hatake Kakashi, I would suggest that you keep your genin under control. They had better remember that this is Sunagaku and not their little tree-ridden home. I don't care how slaves are treated back in Konoha. This is how it is in Suna. You called him human, well he isn't human. He's property. That's all he will ever be, Baki said before he walked forward. Naruto reddened in anger as he clutched his fists. Kakashi stopped whatever thoughts were running through Naruto's head with a hand to his shoulder. Naruto, he's right. He is able to treat his property how he sees fit. Even if it is rather unpleasant. This isn't something you can deal with. You can only toughen up and let it go, Kakashi said. Naruto glared so hard into Baki's back that he was hoping for the man to burst into a sea of fire and brimstone, but Naruto had heard Kakashi's words and released his pent-up aggression. Yes, Kakashi-sensei, Naruto hissed out as the team followed after the man named Baki. Baki had quickly gotten Team 7 through the Kazekage mansion. If Naruto were honest, then Baki seemed to be moving rather fast. He probably wanted the team as far away from the Kazekage as possible. Naruto didn't understand where all of this mistrust was coming from, but he couldn't get it out of his head the encounter from earlier. Now Naruto knew that a master didn't have to be nice, but perhaps he had some kind of inflated view that a master would at the very least treat their slaves civilly. Apparently Baki had shown him that this wasn't the case in Sunagaku. Granted, Naruto didn't see how slaves were treated in Konoha, but he assumed it was a little better, or at least he believed it was. I'm not going to be like you, Naruto thought as he looked at Baki. After a small trip, The group of 5 stood in front of a door. No funny business, any of you. Handle your business and then get out, Baki said. Kakashi just nodded, and that seemed to satisfy the Tsunajonin for now. He knocked on the door. Enter, came a firm voice. By your acceptance, Kazekage-sama, Baki said as he opened the door, which allowed Team 7 to enter. Baki didn't get very far into the door before Naruto nearly missed the man's light shiver. He must not have been the only one who noticed, because Kakashi's eye narrowed for a moment before Baki continued moving. He stepped inside along with Team 7. Everyone quickly noticed that they weren't alone. A boy with red hair and a gourd strapped this back stood between the team and the Kazekage. I'll speak with you later, Gaara. Return to your team, the Kazekage said. Naruto noticed the redhead boy turn around, and for a second their eyes locked. Naruto remembered the pressure when he faced those 2 missing nin Chunin from Kurigakure. He remembered the pressure when he fought Zabuza along with Sasuke in order to free Kakashi. He remembered the pressure when he and Sasuke fought Haku. He also remembered the pressure when he, Sasuke and Shibuki fought Suion. Right now, those eyes froze Naruto. The pressure currently was 5 times what he remembered. The boy named Gaara took a step forward and passed by Naruto and his team without a second thought. He turned a corner and vanished. Sakura released her breath while Sasuke and Naruto looked back at the door that the boy just left. Kazekage-sama, a team from Konoha has arrived. They have a letter for the council, sir. Baki said. The Kazekage looked up from his work. Naruto found it a little interesting that the man's hair was just like the boy's who had just left, if a little darker. Sheesh, by the man's stern expression, he looked like had never smiled a day in his life. You are dismissed, Baki. Good work, he said. Baki merely gave a salute before he turned around, gave one last glare to Kakashi and his team, and walked out of the room before he closed the door, which left the Kazekage and Team 7 alone. Or so it probably seemed. So to what do I owe the honor of having Konoha shinobi in my village? You have a letter for my council and myself. No doubt from your own council, I would assume. Why should I accept your letter after this strait you've put my village in? You're rather far away from home, aren't you? He asked. Sakura gave a sharp gulp while Sasuke narrowed his eyes. Naruto just folded his arms while Kakashi cleared his throat. We meant no disrespect in this letter, Kazekage-sama. Konoha has learned of Tsunagakure's situation, and we wouldn't be so uncouth to think you need any sympathy for your situation. However, our Hokage has felt that, while the Wind Daimyo's decision was unexpected, we are still abiding by a treaty between our nations, and no treaty can stand without some form of goodwill. That's why we have been sent to give you this letter, Kakashi said as simply and smoothly as he possibly could. The Kazekage gave him a hard look. He then looked at the copy ninjas genin team. A civilian girl, a Uchiha, and a boy with an odd presence. He stared at Naruto for a time. Am I seeing things? There were no rumors of the Yondaime having a child, the Kazekage thought to himself before he shook his head. He looked back to Kakashi's stare. Well, you'll forgive me if I'm a little skeptical of your intentions. But I suppose I can't slight much against Konoha since they came all this way here. Have the blonde genin give it to me, the Kazekage said. Soon all eyes landed on Naruto. Sasuke, Sakura and Kakashi looked at Naruto in surprise. Naruto looked a little shocked as well. What? Why me? Why do I have to do it? Naruto asked. The Kazekage gave a hard glare. I'll tell you simply. Because I don't trust your sensei. That is all there is to it. Unless there is a reason you can't hand it to me, he said with a snort to add. Naruto's eyebrow twitched as Kakashi rubbed his hair and internally sighed. How complicated. Well, looks like you'll have to give him the letter, Naruto, Kakashi said, handing the blonde the scroll. Naruto gawked in Kakashi's face and at his sensei's eye smile. Naruto gave Kakashi a light frown before he pulled up his hand and grabbed the letter. He then turned to the Kazekage and walked up to the man. Naruto's eyes and the Kazekage's eyes never left each other. Naruto couldn't be sure, but he actually felt like he was being probed right now. It was almost like every strength or weakness that he ever had was laid in front of the most powerful shinobi in Suna. Yet, Naruto could get nothing from this guy in front of him. It only showed the gap in experience. Naruto appeared before the Kazekage and held out his hand. Here, Naruto said, holding out the letter. Naruto, be more respectful to Kazekage-sama. Sakura hissed out. Naruto didn't seem to be listening to her as he and the cage stared at each other for a moment. The cage took the letter into his hands. Good. I will review this with my council at a later date. Until then, you are welcome to enjoy Sunagaku until we give you our reply. You can show yourselves the way out, the cage said. Naruto resisted the urge to snarl be grimaced. A sudden burning sensation raced through his arm. He quickly looked down and noticed his master seal burning. Kuso. Naruto said before nearly shocking everyone as he charged for the door. Naruto. Where are you going? Kakashi asked as Naruto pulled open the door in rampant haste. The cage raised an eyebrow as Naruto turned around, fear evident on his face. Something is happening to Fu-san and Uzumaki-san. I gotta go. Naruto nearly shouted as he ran past the corner and pushed a couple of people out of the way. Sasuke and Sakura glanced to each other, but neither wasted any time in running after Naruto. Kakashi wasn't very far behind. The cage watched the team leave before a shinobi appeared behind them. Investigate. Interfere if needed, he said. The shinobi gave a nod. At once Rasa-sama, the shinobi said before they vanished into the wind. Rasa looked back at his closed door before he moved into his work. So, Konoha had a living secret as well. Now this was a surprise. Not like it would truly change anything regardless of the fact. He quickly signed a document, but a small smirk made its way to his face. Perhaps he could find some use for this group after all. Meanwhile, Uzumaki pulled Fu back and growled as Asuna Genin gave them both a hard look. I'm just saying that you slaves should remember to watch where you're going. You almost pushed me down. What kind of master do you have that can't even discipline you? The least you could say is sorry for bumping into me. He snarled as Uzumaki and Fu gave him looks of their own. Why should I say sorry to you? You're the one who bumped into me. We were minding our own business SSU. Fu argued back as the Suna Genin gave a light grin. Obviously you aren't from Suna or you are new here, but slaves aren't meant to talk back to regular folks without their master present. Someone should discipline the both of you, he said with a growl as he slowly began to unwrap the figure that had been tied to his back. Fu gasped as Uzumaki frowned. Alright, fine, we're sorry for bumping into you. Can we drop it now? Uzumaki asked as the Suna Genin snorted. Like I'll accept your little apology now. You can say sorry while I discipline you since your master won't. He growled. Uzumaki growled as she reached into her pouch and pulled out a kunai. The Suna Genin seemed surprised for a moment before he grinned. Oh, you really don't want to do that? Any slaves in Suna carrying a dangerous weapon is instantly confined and detained, especially against a village's shinobi. That only shows me that you really must not be used to things here, he said as Uzumaki growled. My master gave me one right. The right to defend myself, no matter the situation. Uzumaki argued back as the Suna Genin growled. Then you'd better defend yourself well, bitch, he shouted as Uzumaki watched the wrapped figure behind the cloth charge at her. Uzumaki gave a sharp gasp as she tightened the grip on her kunai. A flash appeared across her face as two sets of feet bashed against the wrapped figure, which sent it into the ground with a crash which picked up dust. The Suna Genin seemed surprised for a moment as the dust cleared. Fu and Uzumaki opened their eyes and their surprise couldn't have been more obvious as they saw Naruto standing between them and their assailant. Who the hell are you? The boy asked before he noticed the Konoha headband. Naruto gave him a sharp glare before he turned back to Uzumaki and Fu. You guys alright? You're not hurt, are you? Naruto asked as he checked both for injuries. Fu seemed to get out of her surprise the fastest as she felt a small well of comfort seeing her master's face. We're fine, Master SSU, Fu responded. Naruto gave a grin and a sigh of relief. Awesome. Then I got here just in time, Naruto said with a smile. You did great, Uzumaki-san. I'm glad you both remembered what I said, Dadbeo. Naruto remarked as Uzumaki slowly nodded. She slowly placed away her kunai as Naruto turned around and glared at the Suna Genin. I'm Uzumaki Naruto, the master of these two. Who are you and why are you attacking them? Naruto asked angrily as the Suna Genin gave a look of surprise. So, they really weren't from Suna. HMPH, so you're their master. No wonder they don't have any manners with a shorty like you. Your little girls bumped into me and didn't even apologize, he said while Naruto snorted. Well then I guess you suck as a genin if you don't even have the awareness to avoid getting bumped by others, Naruto instigated. The Suna genin growled as his finger twitched. Watch it, punk. You don't know who you're messing with, the boy growled. Naruto folded his arms. Wrong, you're the one who doesn't know who he's messing with if you attack our teammate. I would suggest you watch your step. Naruto, Uzumaki, and Fu turned around to see Sasuke and Sakura walking in from the distance. The Suna genin frowned. Well, it's the other tree huggers. You Konoha shinobi always couldn't handle anything on your own, always needing your little friends to back you up, he said as Sakura growled. Sasuke and Naruto hardened their frowns. Well, if that's the case, you're more than welcome to attack us. We'll just report it back to the cage who we just left from. Attacking foreign shinobi on a diplomatic mission could make things worse off for your village, couldn't it? Sakura asked. The Suna genin snarled for a second. He definitely saw what the kunoichi was trying to do and he hated that it was working. There you are. Oi Kankuro, what the hell are you doing? The Suna genin grimaced as he turned around and noticed a blonde-haired girl walking up to him. Don't get involved, Tamari. I'm about to show these tree huggers not to start shit they can't finish in our village. The genin named Kankuro growled as Tamari turned back to the group from Konoha. She then sighed and smacked Kankuro over the head. I don't care about your issues. Work them out later. Baki-sensei is looking for you. He sent me to get your dumb butt. You always don't want to piss off Gaara, do you? Let's go, she said as she grabbed Kankuro's ear and pulled him off despite his complaints. As she walked off, Tamari gave one last look to Uchiha Sasuke and Uzumaki Naruto. She snorted before she and Kankuro turned a corner and left. The team watched them leave before Naruto released a breath. You guys sure you're okay? He asked one more time. Hi master. Sorry that we involved you. We didn't mean to cause any trouble, Uzumaki said, but Naruto waved her off. There's one like that in every village, I guess. At least you're okay, Naruto said with a smile. Fu and Uzumaki nodded with small bows and smiles of their own. But master, how did you know where to find us? And how did you know we were in trouble? Fu asked. Naruto quickly held up his master seal. There was a burning feeling from my seal. I ran out of the cage office and I sent clones in every direction. I was just likely that I was the real one who found you guys, Naruto said. Fu and Uzumaki quickly nodded to that as well, which gave Kakashi just enough time to arrive. I assume all incidents have been taken care of? He asked. Everyone nodded as Naruto growled. That guy, Kankuro, he swung something at Uzumaki and Fu, Naruto said. Sasuke and Sakura nodded. That was most likely a puppet master. Sunagaku is known for their mastery of puppets. I would think that genin is a part of the puppet corps here, Uzumaki said. Naruto blinked. Kakashi seemed surprised as well. Interesting that an Iwa genin would know that. While it wasn't uncommon knowledge, it wasn't exactly common either. How do you know that? Sakura asked a little surprised. Uzumaki blinked. Apparently Konoha's education wasn't as extensive as Iwagakure's. We learned about that in history class. It's something every Iwagakure Academy student learns before they become genin, Uzumaki said. She noticed Sakura and Naruto scratch their cheeks while Sasuke folded his arms and closed his eyes. Even Fu didn't hide the blush of embarrassment on her face. Uzumaki gawked. Seriously? No academy other than Iwagakure taught that. The former Iwa kunoichi almost felt the urge to groan. Well, we had a rather eventful day. Shall we go back to the hotel? Kakashi asked. Team 7 looked at him before they nodded and the group quickly left the area. Out of the corner of Kakashi's eye, he noticed a swift movement on the rooftops. Looks like they wouldn't be able to rest as much as they thought. Back at the cage office, Rasa quickly assembled his council. He had just finished reading the letter. I admit that it sounds suspicious, but perhaps this is the chance we were looking for. Perhaps we might be able to take this under consideration, one of the council members said before another leaned forward. We'd better not forget that Konoha's the one who put us in this position in the first place, she said with a slight frown. Well, technically it wasn't Konoha, but rather it was the Wind Daimyo who switched over to their services. Though I will admit that I don't see a reason as to why Konoha would truly try to help us, another said off to the side. The team from Konoha's Jonin instructor told me that the Sandaime valued our treaty. This is supposed to be a type of solution to both predicaments, Rasa said as the council remained quiet for a moment. If we did accept this, then all the planning will have gone to waste, I'm sure. Are we willing to throw that away? One asked. Rasa continued to hear others talk before a shinobi appeared behind him. They whispered into his ear and Rasa's glare hardened for a moment before the shinobi left. It seems that team from Konoha had an incident with my son. It turns out that the blonde of the team is a slave master with 2 slaves, Rasa said with a frown. The council members murmured among themselves for a moment. It seems one of his slaves pulled out a weapon against my son, Rasa said. This seemed to quickly trigger everyone, but Rasa held up his hand. I will be having a talk with Konkuro later. Turns out he caused the incident, but this does bring up an interesting opportunity, Rasa said with a finger to his chin. What are you talking about, Kazekage-sama? It's against the law in Suna to harm a shinobi, especially for a slave, one of the councilmen said. Rasa indeed knew that, and dare he say that he was probably going to have a bit of joy in letting them be known to the Konoha team when he summoned them tomorrow. Slowly the Kazekage began to speak with his council on his thoughts. The sun set in the sky and the moon quickly took its place. Naruto leaned on the ledge as the arid wind breezed through his face. Master, why are you out here? Naruto turned and noticed Uzumaki and xFū looked at him from the door that led to the outside. Naruto gently smiled. Nothing. Just thinking about today is all. Har har. Naruto thinking. Don't kid yourself. Right? Naruto asked, but he only noticed xFū and Uzumaki looking at him. Master, you receive insults regularly? xFū asked. She had noticed how his teammates had treated him. His female teammate seemed to treat him the worst. His other teammate wasn't exactly mean, but he wasn't exactly friendly either. Meh. Just take them in stride, I guess. I was the dead last in the academy, Naruto said. Uzumaki and xFū nearly seemed surprised by his statement. Well, master, I don't think the dead last of an academy would be able to sneak through a slave auction, Uzumaki said. Naruto couldn't stop a chuckle. Sure, it wasn't the best, but Naruto knew where the heart of the comment was. Thanks, Uzumaki. You guys did great. I'm glad you defended yourselves. I don't care about the price I have to pay. I don't care how other masters treat their slaves. I want you both to defend yourselves, Naruto said. xFū and Uzumaki nodded. We will, master, xFū said. Naruto gave her one last nod before he turned over and walked with them back inside. In another part of the village, Baki's eyes scanned a scroll as many thoughts raced through his mind. This is your team's mission from Kazekage-sama. Your team must follow through, came a voice from behind Baki. The man gave a light glare before he furled up the scroll. That was fine by him. He felt the presence behind him leave as he made his way back into his house. No one was wiser to the deed that had just transpired. Next morning, Naruto groaned as a knock came onto his door. He opened one of his eyes. Who the hell could have been up this early in the morning? I will get it, master. Naruto groggily heard xFū say as she leapt from the bed that she and Uzumaki were sharing as Naruto slept in the other one. xFū gave a short yawn before moving from their room and to the door. Kami bless her heart. Naruto was nearly close to going back to sleep before he felt xFū's hand on his shoulder. Master, there is a Suna Jonin here for you, xFū said. Naruto opened one of his eyes and groaned to himself. Thanks, xFū, Naruto said with a tired yawn. In time, Naruto leaned up and walked to the door to the entrance of his hotel. He opened it. Are you Uzumaki, Naruto? The Suna Jonin asked. Naruto rubbed his eyes. Who wants to know? Naruto asked as he opened his eyes only to notice a scroll in front of his face. The Suna Jonin stared at him. You and the rest of your team are to report to Kazekage-sama as soon as possible. Get dressed, he ordered before he tossed the scroll in Naruto's face. He then left, leaving Naruto in confusion. Of course, Uzumaki and xFū made their appearance as Naruto opened the scroll. He quickly read its contents and for once Naruto turned fearfully to his slaves. Kakashi-sensei. Naruto shouted at the top of his lungs, waking the entire hotel they stayed in. Needless to say, no one was happy with the Konoha team at that moment in time. The walls rumbled as Sasuke, Sakura and Kakashi were startled awake. Sakura groaned while Sasuke cursed whatever god was running their lives. Kakashi fell from his bed and sighed. Wasn't this supposed to be a vacation? He said he wouldn't give them any training. This was just being mean. I said I was sorry. I needed you awake, Naruto said as they walked through the village. And you couldn't have just knocked on our doors like a regular person. Kami, I think you gave me a headache, Sakura said. Naruto snorted as he gave a short murmur. Like you're one to talk, Sakura, Naruto said underneath his breath, which thankfully Sakura hadn't heard. Ma Sakura, this is rather important. It's not uncommon for the cage of other allying nations to ask for help from the other shinobi. We are rather obligated to help. We will see what the problem is and then we'll decide our course of action. Though, I do wonder why he specifically asked for Naruto, Uzumaki, and xFū, Kakashi said as he watched both former kunoichi walk behind their master at a leisurely pace. Is this about yesterday? When that guy Kankuro was about to fight us? Sakura asked. Kakashi shrugged his shoulders. He didn't know what it was but that was most likely the case seeing as how Naruto had never told of himself being a slave master except to that Suna genin. We weren't in the wrong. That guy made the first move and that's what we'll tell them. If they have a problem then we'll make sure that they don't, Sasuke said, which seemed to surprise the rest of the team, but no one seemed to argue against him. In time, Team 7 made it back to the cage office. They walked up the familiar stairs and Naruto wasn't sure, but he felt like he was back in Konoha. Why? People were staring at him. It wasn't outright, but he could see the subtleness of eye movement or the twitching of heads. They were looking at him, but it wasn't in malice or anger, it was curiosity perhaps. Naruto wasn't sure, but he didn't like it. Normally as an attention addict, and Naruto knew he was an attention addict, one was happy to be looked at, but not this subtle look that everyone was carrying. Naruto just didn't like it. Finally, Naruto and the rest of the team made it to the door of the cage's room. Kakashi quickly knocked on the door. Team 7 Kage-sama, Kakashi called. Come in, came the acceptance of Suna's cage as Kakashi opened the door. Everyone filed in and they quickly noticed the Suna Jonin from yesterday, Baki, standing along with his team. Naruto quickly noticed the red-haired boy with the gourd from yesterday. He also noticed the blonde-haired girl that had dragged Kankuro away, Temari if he recalled. Naruto's eyes followed to the third member of the team. Naruto quickly gawked. You're that asshole from yesterday. Naruto shouted, pointing a finger in Kankuro's direction, making the genin snarl. Who the hell are you calling an asshole, punk? Kankuro growled out, which caused Temari to giggle despite herself. Gaara didn't move from his place and he didn't pay any attention to the interaction. Oi Kankuro, control yourself. You're in the presence of the cage. Remember your place. Baki answered harshly, which was enough to send a shiver down Kankuro's spine to remember whose presence he was in. His father didn't look very pleased at the commotion. Hi. Sorry Baki-sensei, Kage-sama, Kankuro said with a small bow of his head. Rasa sent his son scolding glance, but quickly turned back to everyone in the room. Interruptions aside, when I had been informed of a team of Konoha shinobi coming into Sunagaku, I believed that they would act professionally as would any shinobi squad. A shinobi of mine told me of the incident that transpired yesterday. Odd to see a slave master in one so young, Rasa said, staring at Naruto. The blonde flinched when he noticed Baki give him a small stare as well. For the Suna Jonin, it had been clear why the blonde had been upset yesterday. He had his own property. Temari seemed to be looking at him in a mixture of surprise, confusion, and intrigue. Slaves weren't exactly cheap. Temari would know, she had missions for many slave masters in Suna. She had the opportunity to see how they lived. Most masters she had seen were either very rich enough to pay for a whole clan of slaves or just rich enough to pay for one or two. Judging by the two that were behind him, she wasn't sure, but how could a genin afford to acquire slaves? Naruto-san, my shinobi informed me that one of your slaves pulled a weapon on not just one of the shinobi under my command, but also my son. Was this the true purpose for your visit? An assassination attempt? Rasa asked a little angrily. His stern face didn't make it any easier. Kakashi took a step forward. Kage-sama, I can assure you that this was no assassination attempt on your shinobi. I think the best way I can explain this is, Kakashi never got to finish as all eyes were on Naruto when he took a step forward. Yes they did and I'm glad they did, Dadbayo, Naruto said, which nearly shattered everyone's thought processes in the room. Rasa and Baki glared hard at him while Sakura and Sasuke widened their eyes. Even Fu and Uzumaki couldn't keep the shock of their faces as Naruto folded his arms. And if I went back in time and saw the whole thing, then I'd let them do it again. I trust Uzumaki and Fu. I gave them both one right as their master, and that was the right to defend themselves, Naruto declared. Rasa frowned as Kankuro and Temari narrowed their eyes. Are you implying my son started this incident? Rasa asked. Naruto's response was to shrug his shoulders. I don't know. I didn't see the start of the fight. All I saw was Makeup Boy over there throw that thing on his back at Fu and Uzumaki. I think they are allowed to defend themselves then, Naruto said. Rasa turned his gaze to Kankuro, who really seemed to find the left wall interesting. Yes, my shinobi told me that my son was doing something he shouldn't have been doing. I apologize for that. However, in Sunagaku, it is illegal for a slave to carry weaponry in any form, and even more so to strike against a Sunagaku military officer, Rasa said, which prompted Uzumaki to take a step forward. I am the one who dishonored our master. Please punish me, Uzumaki said as people gave her a glance. Property is not meant to speak unless spoken to first. The actions like with your master. Do not interrupt next time, Rasa said as Naruto's glare hardened. Uzumaki held her head down as Naruto frowned. Don't talk to her like that. They are not property, Naruto hissed out as Rasa turned back to Naruto. Team Suna and Team 7 gawked as they stared at Naruto. Even the redhead boy was slightly intrigued at the interaction. You want to punish me? Fine. I can take it, Datbayo. But you will never degrade Fu and Uzumaki like that. Not in front of me, Naruto snarled, which stunned Fu and Uzumaki into silence. Rasa had to admit that he was slightly, ever so slightly impressed by this genin in front of him. It looked like Konoha actually did have something worthwhile in it, scrawny as that worthwhile something was. Well, at least you have no need to run from your wrongdoings. Seeing as how both Suna and Konoha were in the wrong here, then it's only fitting that you do this mission together, Rasa said as he tossed a scroll at Naruto, which he caught. The blonde opened up the scroll and read its content. Prepare for the long journey to the edge of Wind Country, Uzumaki Naruto, Rasa said with a stern face as Naruto sent him a light glare in response. It was official, C-rank missions were cursed. They had to be. Naruto walked back into his room and slammed the door behind him. He growled as he walked across the hotel room. His thoughts were a whirlwind of activity as the door he had slammed closed gently opened behind him. Fu and Uzumaki were silent as they entered. Both watched Naruto move himself in circles around their hotel room. Neither could speak, and they really didn't want to. They had never seen their master angry and forgive them if they weren't too keen on having that anger directed at them for obvious reasons. Both watched as Naruto walked around the room for about 5 minutes while he bit into his thumbnail. Fu mustered up some courage and made herself known. Master, are you okay? Fu asked. She stiffened when Naruto's glare landed on her. Suddenly she felt very small. Naruto took notice of Fu's body and blinked. What am I doing? Naruto thought to himself. He took a deep breath and then exhaled, which released a tired sigh. Gomen Fu. I was just too caught up in my thoughts. My bad, Naruto apologized. Fu merely nodded. At least the anger seemed to weaken from her master's body. Or at the very least he wasn't going to do anything to them about it. Uzumaki took a step forward. Master, did we do something wrong? You are only in this situation because of what we did. It wasn't Fu-san's fault. If it would make you happy, then I can. Uzumaki stopped as Naruto held his hand and shook his head. He gave both his best smile and walked up to them. They watched as he patted their shoulders before he moved up his hands and patted their heads. Fu and Uzumaki remained silent as Naruto grinned. No, you both did exactly what I wanted you to do. Nice work. I just hate that damn old man Kazekage for calling you property, Naruto snarled out. He said, stopping the head rub. Right now Fu and Uzumaki more or less felt like children rather than slaves. While they were relieved that Naruto's annoyance wasn't particularly at them, it was also a surprise of how angry he actually was about the meeting with the Kazekage. Both didn't know why that head rub felt comforting, but it was a nice feeling from the way things had been going lately. So, are you going to accept the mission, Master? Uzumaki asked as Naruto retracted his hand from their heads. They watched him give a sigh before he nodded. Kakashi-sensei says that we're going to have to, so I guess that's how it's going to. I have never been to the edge of Wind Country before, so I doubt I would know what's going on over there. I guess we'll have to see, won't we? Naruto asked. Fu and Uzumaki nodded as Naruto moved to pack up some of his things. Fu and Uzumaki glanced to each other before they moved to get their things as well. It had taken the three virtually half the day to finish packing their things before everyone was to go to dinner. Team 7 sat at the table and over the tatami mat in silence. Uzumaki and Fu sat behind Naruto waiting for any orders to be given to them. They didn't speak, and truth be told, no one was feeling particularly chatty at the moment, not even Naruto. Sasuke was just content to lean against the one of the slide indoors covered in flower paintings. Sakura, much to Naruto's annoyance, kept sending small glances to Fu and Uzumaki. Naruto had no idea what Sakura's problems were, but he really wished that she would just stop making the two feel uncomfortable. Fortunately, Kakashi came through the door and noticed the looks, or lack thereof, on everyone's faces. He rubbed the back of his head. Our food will be ready soon. Until that time, we will go over today, Kakashi said. Sasuke opened his eyes and Sakura leaned up with a nod. Naruto nodded as well. Kakashi slowly took a seat at the table. He cleared his throat before he turned his gaze to his blonde student. Naruto, why, I understood that you were, and rightfully so, upset at the events that transpired. You still should never speak to a cage like that under any circumstances, Kakashi said. Naruto growled. Yeah, well, he had no damn business talking about Fu-san and Uzumaki-san like that. Naruto growled back. No one said anything for a couple of seconds before Kakashi sighed. Yes, that's true, Naruto, but he was not wrong. It doesn't matter how you view them. You can view them as the most human out of the entire population in the world, but it won't change how the eyes of the public and law sees our property, Naruto. They are your property, and it is going to remain that way until either you or they die. Or at least until we can get Jiraiya-sama to look at the seal. Kakashi thought to himself. He watched Naruto ball his fists. Fu and Uzumaki watched him tremble. Naruto took a calming breath, though by Kami he wanted to explode. Perhaps he was just having trouble accepting that fact, that they were property. Naruto, when Uzumaki-san interrupted you to speak, you should have silenced her immediately. They are your responsibility. Slaves are not to speak unless. Kakashi stopped as Naruto slammed his fist against the table, nearly shocking everyone present. Fu and Uzumaki could see the fire in Naruto's eyes when he turned to them for a moment. No, I don't care who they are, but if I am not going to stop them from expressing their opinions. You want me to take responsibility for that? Fine, I'll go on this damn mission by myself along with the Suna team, but I am not going to pretend that Fu-san and Uzumaki-san can be okay with something when I know that they aren't. Naruto hissed out. Neither female said anything. They could only hold their heads down. Uzumaki turned lightly and noticed Fu's clothing from how she sat. Uzumaki noticed just a couple drops of liquid on Fu's clothing. Naruto, stop talking nonsense. If you keep thinking like that, then one day they are going to say the wrong thing at the wrong time, and not just you, but all of Konoha is going to get involved in it. Use your head for once. Sakura spoke out. Naruto turned harshly towards her. It was enough to make Sakura jump lightly. Everyone could see Naruto's knuckles harden. Fu, Uzumaki, can you leave for 5 minutes? Naruto asked. Fu and Uzumaki looked up at their master. Are you sure, master? Uzumaki asked. Both could tell the smile on Naruto was more than a little forced in order to keep himself calm. Yeah, I'll be fine. Promise, Datbeo. Naruto said. Uzumaki and Fu bowed before they stood up and quietly, but quickly, walked out of the room. Fu gently closed the door behind them. Naruto watched them leave with a small grin. However, that grin didn't stay long before he focused himself back on Sakura. You got something you want to say, Sakura? Ever since I told you about Fu and Uzumaki, you've looked at them almost the entire time. You almost can't even let them breathe around us. What is it with you and them? I thought at least you of all people wouldn't be willing to just let something like that go. Why are you always giving them a hard time? Naruto asked. Sakura leaned forward. I'm not giving them a hard time. It's just, I thought you of all people wouldn't take this lying down, Naruto. You own people. How do you think that's going to look to anyone? What happened to that whole never give up attitude? You just rolled over and accepted this. You didn't even attempt to fight back. Plus, what the hell would I know what you do to them when you're not with us? You really think they would tell any of us? Sakura asked. Naruto closed his eyes. What I would do to them? What I would do to them? What the hell do you take me for? You think I'm going to attack them or something? Ever since I got them, I've been trying to at least make their lives a little better. To make sure that they could have at least one damn moment of relief from whatever they experienced before I bought them. In case you forgot about it, Sakura, I bought them to try to free them. It didn't work out for them or me. We're on the same team. Why would you even think I would do something like that? Naruto growled as he smashed his fist into the table, nearly cracking it in half. Sakura swiftly stood to her feet. Because you are a 12-year-old boy living by himself who was never taught anything even resembling manners, etiquette, or even tact. Who the hell would trust a 12-year-old boy to have 2 female slaves? Especially when you didn't even have any parents to teach you. Sakura didn't get to finish before Kakashi covered her mouth. Sakura shivered when she felt Kakashi glare harshly at her. Sasuke glared forward as Naruto looked at the floor. His head covered his eyes. Sakura, that is enough. Now I am going to let you go, but if you open your mouth then it better be to either me or Sasuke, Kakashi replied. Sakura shivered as Kakashi's hand seemed to tighten around her mouth. Don't bother, Kakashi-sensei. I wasn't hungry anyway, Naruto said as he stood up. Team 7 watched as their blonde teammate opened the door. Everyone was surprised to see the server with a tray of food in the hallway. The server blinked before Naruto budged out of the way and walked back to his room. Naruto used his ki and opened the door. He walked inside and noticed Fu and Uzumaki sitting at their room's table. Naruto could see the saddened look on Fu's face. Uzumaki hid it a little better, but Naruto was good at reading people where it counted. She was affected as well. I guess we were being too loud. Naruto asked, sheepishly. He took a seat next to them. Master, did you really not have any parents? Fu asked. Naruto glanced to his green-haired servant for a moment before he looked at the ceiling. Yeah, I didn't. Sakura's right though. I didn't have anyone to teach me all that complicated stuff, but I guess Iruka-sensei and Gigi tried to teach me as much as they could. Apparently it wasn't enough, Naruto said. Fu merely nodded as she looked down. Uzumaki frowned. Neither was sure what to say. Fu, do you know why I bought you? Naruto asked. Fu looked up and stared at her master. To return me to Taki, master. You believed you were doing the right thing, SSU, Fu said quickly. Naruto gave a light chuckle. Yeah, there was that reason too. Yeah, that was the plan, but I also bought you for another reason. You and Uzumaki, more than anyone else I meet, you both look like you needed someone to help you. I didn't care that Uzumaki was from another village. At that moment, she just looked like someone who needed help. Fu, I wanted to help you because I'm just like you, Naruto said. Fu and Uzumaki widened their eyes as Fu leaned forward. Master, you mean, Fu stammered, but Naruto nodded. Do you guys know about what happened to Konoha 12 years ago? Naruto asked. Fu remained silent, but Uzumaki was the one to continue onward. The Kyuubi no Yoko attacked the village before being defeated by the Yondaime Hokage. That would make master the Kyuubi Jinchuriki, Uzumaki remarked. Fu turned to her master, but Naruto didn't look her in the eyes. Her gaze softened when she noticed him give a breath. I guess I knew something about being a slave in some way. Not that I was owned, but that I wasn't exactly ever going to be treated like a normal person or to be treated less than that. I guess I just wanted to ease your burden if only a little bit. I don't want to hurt anyone, least of all you two. When Sakura said, you just rolled over and accepted it. I wonder if that was true, Naruto said. Fu shook her head. I guess I did it because I knew what you were going through, if even a little bit. I wanted to avoid a crappy situation like this. I guess what I'm saying is, it felt good helping out someone like me, Naruto answered honestly. Fu scratched her cheek. Uzumaki glanced between the two. She had never, in any right mind, ever thought that the Kyuubi Jinchuriki would also be her master. They say that the world is a small place, but apparently it wasn't small enough. Master, xFū didn't get to speak further before a knock on the door came. Naruto turned around and stood to his feet. He really hoped it wasn't his team. He wasn't in the mood to see Sakura at the moment. Though if it was Kakashi with something urgent, then there wasn't really anything Naruto could do about that. He opened the door and blinked when he noticed the server at the door. Good evening, sir. Your sensei assumed you would not be joining, so he had me take your food to your room. I will collect the tray later, they said as they gave him the tray of food. Naruto watched them go before he set the food down on the table. No one touched the food for a moment. Fu and Uzumaki turned to their master to hear his stomach growl through the room. When they turned to him, they noticed Naruto, admiring the wall decorations. Uzumaki shook her head. He really is an idiot, master, Uzumaki thought, but she didn't stop the light smile before she took a plate. Allow me to prepare your food, master, she said. Uzumaki picked out most of the food before offering Naruto his plate along with a cup of tea. Naruto gave a thanks to Uzumaki. The room was silent for a moment. Naruto looked at Fu and Uzumaki before he tapped his finger on the table. Fu and Uzumaki looked at their master and his thumping finger. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Fu glanced back to the food and then looked at Naruto's plate. Uzumaki-san, can you hand me a plate to SSU? Fu asked. Uzumaki widened her eyes as she looked back at her master. Oh right, he was that type of master. Alright, Uzumaki said as she handed Fu a plate before picking up one herself. Both girls got their own food and sat it at their sides of the table. They saw the smile on Naruto's face widen before he clapped his hands together. Itadakimasu, Naruto prayed with Fu and Uzumaki right behind him. The three ate happily into the night. Meanwhile, at the xCage mansion, Rasa frowned as he glared forward. You do understand what I am asking you to do. It's not a simple request, but it must be done. I apologize that it has to come to this, but it is for the good of Sunagaku. It's what your teacher would have wanted. For the good of Sunagaku, I hope you are able to complete your mission. However, should you fail or should you succeed, you will never return here, Rasa said. In the shadows, a person merely bowed their head before handing him their Sunagaku headband. They then picked up another Suna headband and made for the door. The xCage looked at the door before he gave a small sigh. He then looked out the window. Well, regardless if the mission tomorrow was a success or not, it still hinged upon other factors. Now you might ask, Rasa, just what do you hope to gain by doing this? Well, first, Rasa answers to no one, and anything he would have told would have been on a need-to-know basis. Second, he would have told you that for Suna he was ready to pave the sand in blood. Even if it was the blood of his shinobi against outside threats. Well, he supposed that Konoha shinobi had their uses as well, especially of the blonde one was who Rasa actually thought he was. It would be interesting to take note of in the coming days. The next morning, Team 7 quickly made it to the front of Suna's gates. They could already see the team from Sunagaku waiting for them. The thing that almost set Naruto on edge was when he noticed the red-haired boy from yesterday. Being who Naruto was, you didn't stay alive for long periods of time without some type of survival instinct, and right now that instinct was telling Naruto that this boy, who was the same age as him, was completely dangerous. Oi, it looks like tree huggers got here on time. Along with their little pets, the genin named Kankuro said. Naruto frowned, but a hand from Kakashi stopped any action that Naruto might have been thinking about. Naruto just settled for hoping the guy would burst into flames from his glares. It did amuse Naruto when Baki gave Kankuro a harsh glare. Kankuro, that's enough. We're going to be working together, so I would suggest you act right or else. Baki left that threat hanging in the air, which had Kankuro swallow the lump in his throat. You understood, Baki-sensei, Kankuro said with a frown before he turned back to the group of Konoha shinobi. The group from Suna and the group from Konoha gave each other a warning look. You haven't even told us what we're doing. You only told us that we were going to the edge of Wind Country. How about you explain that first before we go anywhere? Everyone turned and noticed Sasuke with his arms folded. While I wish Sasuke had said it a little more respectfully, I am inclined to agree. We haven't been told what we're doing, so if you could enlighten us then that would be appreciated, Kakashi said. Truth be told, he was a little wary of even going with this team. Call Kakashi paranoid if you will, but he didn't live this long by making stupid decisions, and this was definitely outside of the normal parameters. Baki cleared his throat before he pointed out into the horizon of sand and hot sun. We will be going to a seaport at the edge of Wind Country. There are many untold lands beyond Wind Country. Lands that we aren't permitted to go across, but many other people are willing to risk their lives. We're going there to meet an informant. He has some details for us. So long as you all cooperate, that is, Baki said. Kakashi narrowed his eye, but he didn't comment. Well, if that's all we're doing, then that's fine. We'll try not to be any trouble, Kakashi said. Naruto grunted before he settled his eyes on Kankuro. Just make sure that makeup boy over there keeps his hands to himself. I have no problems kicking his back to this village if he touches xFū or Uzumaki like last time, Naruto warned. Temari had to chuckle at the comment about her little brother's looks, but Kankuro snarled. It's war paint, you dumb blonde. Not like I would want to touch used property anyway, Kankuro huffed out. xFū and Uzumaki didn't speak, but Naruto allowed his hands to bleed as his tightened them. Kakashi had drilled into his head on the way from the hotel that the only reason Suna wasn't taking this more seriously was because their own shinobi had initiated first, but Kakashi wanted Naruto to know that striking another village's shinobi for any other reason was prone to the striker being placed in Suna authority. That would have made it difficult if xFū or Uzumaki landed in Suna's hands. Naruto wouldn't give that asshole Cage nor this mascara bastard the satisfaction. Unfortunately, that meant taking insults even if he didn't want to. Kankuro, shut your mouth before I kill you. We have wasted enough time with this pointless discussion. Let's complete our mission, Gaara said. Naruto and the rest of Team 7's expressions were easy to distinguish. They didn't know the guy, but had they just heard that he would kill his own teammate? Why yeah. Gee, got it. Gaara. Shutting up now, Kankuro said before he quickly stopped talking. What the hell? He gives the guy with the gourd more respect than he does his own sensei, Naruto thought to himself. He didn't know it, but Sasuke, Kakashi, Sakura, xFū, and Uzumaki were having similar thoughts to his own. Gaara didn't say any more on the subject and merely walked out of the village gates and in the direction that everyone was getting ready to go in. Well then, Team 7, better hope you've packed enough. We'll be at this for a while. Baki said as his team moved out. Sakura quickly grabbed Kakashi's arm. Kakashi-sensei, is this really a good idea? Sakura asked. Kakashi sighed. He would have liked to say no, it wasn't, but regardless they had to go through with it. We'll play it by ear, Sakura. We have to go through with it, but I expect everyone to have their eyes peeled, Kakashi said. Sasuke nodded. Sakura did the same. Naruto glared at the Suna group, but he agreed as well. Naruto turned around and faced xFū and Uzumaki. I don't care what anyone calls you. I'll make sure to protect you both, Dadbao, Naruto said. Uzumaki didn't show any outward expression, but xFū couldn't resist the light smile on her face. That said, both were surprised when Naruto patted their shoulders. I want you guys to be cautious as well. Mascara boy over there does anything weird, then let me know about it. I'm not going to let him get either of you again, Naruto growled out before he turned around and walked to catch up to Sakura and Sasuke. xFū and Uzumaki stood for a moment before Kakashi cleared his throat. While I do sympathize with your situation, I would also like to say that you both have no idea just how much Naruto might need you. He tries so hard to act tough, but he is actually more fragile than you could recognize. Look after him. He needs someone, Kakashi said to them as he walked forward. xFū and Uzumaki glanced to each other. Both didn't know why their masters Jonin sensei had said these words to them, but if he thought they were able to leave, then that was pretty stupid. It's not like they were going anywhere, even if they wanted to. xFū and Uzumaki just followed after the groups. The hot sun blazed in the sky as Team Baki and Team 7 traversed the desert. It just had to be hot today of all days. It had been 2 hours since everyone had departed from Suna. If there was one thing Naruto hated right now about the Suna team, it was that they were so easily accustomed to this level of heat. Team 7 had been showing small signs of sweat, but they hadn't been out for so long as for them to be drenched in it just quite yet. What's the matter with you all? You're trailing too far behind. Kankuro pointed out. Naruto could feel the heat of the sun increasing his irritation. Sakura was the same way. And while Sasuke wasn't as outwardly expressing as his teammates, he was still prone to showing his annoyance of the situation by frowning. Kakashi didn't seem to mind it really, but then again he was just plain awesome. Fu and Uzumaki kept close behind Naruto. The latter seemed content to merely read a book she had purchased from the Suna bookstore just yesterday. Fu really wished she had something to do like Uzumaki did, but she really hated books. They were so boring. Leave them alone, Kankuro. It would stand to reason that they wouldn't be adjusted to this temperature, Baki said with a frown. Kankuro sighed, but he nodded. Anyone adjusted to this temperature isn't human, Naruto remarked more to himself. Sasuke and Sakura couldn't help but agree. While Naruto wasn't particularly talking to each of them, least of all Sakura, he wasn't above them all having some common ground to stand on. Now that's just rude. You guys obviously just need to learn the proper technique is all, Kakashi said with a smile. He flinched when he saw his team and even Naruto's slaves glaring at him. Hell, even Uzumaki was glaring at him. I mean, I could teach it to you while we walk. It would be good practice, but I don't think you guys want to do it now. I mean that would require working in this hot sun, thus making you even more tired, which in turn might even cause you to faint. You wouldn't want that, would you? Kakashi asked. Uzumaki looked into Naruto's eyes. Just once, master and slave had a common thinking pattern. Master, please let me poison it. He wouldn't notice, Uzumaki said. Naruto bit his lower lip, but again all of God, fate, and every other god, demon, or otherwise he just shook his head. Uzumaki merely nodded and went back to her book. 10 hours of pure, unadulterated, boring, tedious, heinous, jaw-clenching, hand-balling, walking passed by for the two teams. The sun had long since vanished from the sky and was replaced by the moon. The teams had to stick a little closer than before to keep from getting lost, which Baki said was common in the desert. The thing that pissed Team 7 off. It was just as hot in the night as it was in the morning. Everyone came to a stop as Baki opened up a map, pulled out a flashlight, and looked the map over. He narrowed his eyes. We will stop here. There is a rock with shade enough to keep us cool. We will take shifts with each person of each team standing guard with the other for 2 hours. Then we will sleep, Baki said. Temari and Kankuro nodded. Gaara didn't move. However, Naruto and Sakura dropped to their knees before they huffed. xFū, water bottle please, Naruto asked. Quickly Fu gave a nod and appeared at Naruto's side. Everyone watched as she unzipped her pouch. Naruto, of course, had protested to saying that he could carry his own water, but Fu said that it was hardly a challenge to carry a bottle of water inside of a pouch. Naruto just gave a nod. Here, master, Fu said as she handed Naruto his orange water bottle. What? Yeah, it was orange. Shut up. Naruto quickly thanked Fu before refreshing his throat with the cooling liquid. Sakura, Sasuke, and even Kakashi began to do the same. Fu and Uzumaki took a separate place before refreshing themselves as well. How sad. Here I thought Konoha shinobi were supposed to be tougher than this, proclaiming to be the strongest village and all that, Temari said with a small grin. Seriously, travels of this nature for Sunagaku shinobi were nothing. They weren't even running. This was just a simple cakewalk at best, and here were 3 genin just nearly out of breath from a 10-hour walk. Talk about pathetic. Oh yeah, I'd like to see your team run, hop, skip, and jump for 10 hours through trees. Not like there's anything dangerous out here except the possibility of us getting sand in our shorts, Naruto grumbled rather loudly. Temari frowned in annoyance before she turned around and placed her hands on her hips. Wind country isn't all sand, idiot. There are trees for us to practice your little tree hopping. Don't try to sound so smug, Temari argued. Naruto set her a light glare of his own. Sheesh, Shikamaru was right. Most girls were troublesome. Yeah right. Bet you couldn't try tree hopping in the winter time. I would like to see you guys do that, Naruto said with a growl. At this, Sakura, Sasuke and Kakashi stiffened. Oh god, so they weren't the only ones. Uzumaki took note of the reactions on her master's team. They looked like they had just seen the literal embodiment of death and destruction. She didn't get it. Was Uzumaki missing something? Uzumaki turned to grab her pouch before she noticed Fu with a shiver. Fu-san, Are you alright? Uzumaki asked. Whether the sweat that fell from her face was from the heat or from sudden anxiety, Uzumaki wasn't sure. Tree hopping in the winter. So much ice. So cold. So cc cold. Fu shivered. Tamari, Konkuro, and even Baki were stumped. What the hell were they all talking about? How bad could tree hopping in the winter be? It's not like Baki would have known. He hardly ever really had to go out of the village during the winter months. Was there something they were missing? Well, drama set aside, everyone quickly sorted themselves over. They had left in the afternoon, so it was essentially close to midnight. Master, would you like me to hand you your food? Uzumaki asked. Naruto leaned over and smiled. Thank you, Uzumaki-san. Could you also get Fu-san's food also since she's putting down the sleeping bags? Naruto asked. Uzumaki quickly gave a nod of her head before she moved away. Sakura and Sasuke took out their food as well. Most of it was leftovers from the dinner they had last night before Kakashi sent what Naruto had ordered to his room. Sakura did feel bad about what she was about to say, but she was just trying to prove a point. She really wished Naruto could see that. Contrary to popular belief, Sakura didn't wish for Naruto's downfall every waking day of her life. Okay, maybe her introduction back at the academy was unfair, she knew that, but she didn't want things to turn out like this. Ever since Naruto left, Sasuke had made a point of being extremely short with Sakura. He told her off more harsher than usual. Whatever patience Sasuke had with Sakura was dwindling away. Right now, Sakura felt like she was at a lose for words. Slowly everyone settled into eating with Naruto and Fu complimenting Uzumaki on her homemade bentos. Honestly, honey could go with just about anything. No one said it, but some of the groups were a tad jealous given their own lunches. Uzumaki merely took the compliments as they came. She wasn't used to being complimented so easily, least of all by people her own age. Especially not in Iowa. From the corner of his eye, Baki watched as Naruto ate with his slaves. Not that Baki wanted to say, irritated, but he was unsettled by the sight. Slaves did not eat with their masters and they did not smile or laugh like this in their master's presence. Slaves were just supposed to be the background. They were supposed to be seen and not heard. They weren't to speak unless spoken to. Yet, for two young girls who were turned into lower beings with no rights, they looked even happier and even more fulfilled than he remembered any slave he had seen being. Watching Fu give a smile to Naruto while Naruto complimented Uzumaki was rather odd. Baki snorted before he went back to his work. It was no concern of his. Gaara, as per the usual, you're going to take the guard duty. Report any suspicious activity from afar or from near, Baki said. Gaara didn't give an acknowledgement of the order, but Baki knew that Gaara had heard him. Naruto, you will be taking the first shift. Then we'll rotate for Sasuke and Sakura, then myself. Keep an eye open, Naruto. We won't know what this Suna team will pull, so we had best be prepared, Kakashi said. Sakura and Sasuke frowned. Sasuke slowly leaned forward. We're allies with Suna, aren't we? Why should we fear them? Sasuke asked. Kakashi turned to his brunette student and narrowed his eye. Today's ally can easily turn into tomorrow's enemy, Sasuke. I have seen it many times. While Suna and Konoha are allies, we are still on rigid terms. We're even more so on rigid terms with the Wind Daimyo taking his business to Konoha, which is why we were assigned this mission in the first place. Question everything, but assume nothing, Kakashi said. Sasuke, Sakura, and Naruto nodded. Naruto quickly turned around. Gomen, Fu-san, Uzumaki-san, but during the shift can one of you stay up with me? Naruto asked. Fu and Uzumaki blinked. High Master. Which one of us? Uzumaki asked. Naruto glanced between the two of them for a second. Honestly, I thought you both would discuss it. But, it just has to be one of you, Naruto said. His team had spared him a look which had Kakashi coming over to Naruto. What are you thinking, Naruto? Kakashi asked. While the Jonin couldn't meddle in master-slave affairs, he was sure that his jurisdiction as a Jonin sensei and the safety of his team held a bit of prevalence to his asking of his question. Naruto turned around and gave a wide smile. When I was walking Fu-san and Uzumaki-san back to my house, we left to get supplies. They told me about their cool abilities. They both use bugs like Shino does. I remember playing hide and seek with Shikamaru, Kiba, and Choji. Shino had joined in one time cause Kiba kept bugging him. So we played. We could never find Shino, even with Kiba's help and Shikamaru's know-how. It wasn't till after the game was over that Shino came out. We pestered him about why we couldn't find him. A ladybug landed on his arm. He said that he had his insects scattered throughout the ground and each told him where we were and how far we were from him. It was like some early warning system, right? So I was going to have Uzumaki-san and Fu-san do the same thing, Naruto said. Sasuke, Sakura, and Kakashi remained silent. Uzumaki mulled it over in her head. That honestly wasn't what she was expecting, but it was indeed something she had done before. Of course the Kamizuru clan had been able to do elementary scouting like that. It wasn't like it was hard to do. It was a basic clan exercise. At least it was for her. If that's the case, master, then Uzumaki-san might be better, Fu said, which got everyone's attention, including Uzumbaki's. From my problem, I can only communicate with insects. If they aren't around me, then I wouldn't really know. Uzumaki-san's also been at it longer, I think, If you want me to try, then I can do that too, but I think Uzumaki-san would be better, Fu said. Naruto had always heavily insisted or implied that they had free speech and shouldn't withhold their opinions from him. Fu had really hoped that she wasn't interpreting that wrong. If she was and she had spoken without being addressed, then she feared for any retribution. Fu jumped slightly as Naruto clasped her hands in his own. That's an awesome idea, Fu-san. Arigato, Naruto proclaimed. Fu didn't know how to respond to her master's enthusiasm, but she was actually relieved. She didn't know why that smile on her master's face was so addicting. Glad to help, master, Fu said with her own cheery expression. Naruto just nodded before he turned to Uzumaki. Can you do it, Uzumaki-san? Naruto asked. Uzumaki resisted the urge to snort. She knew her master wasn't doubting her ability. At least it didn't sound like he was. Something of that nature was easy for Uzumaki to do even in her sleep. Yes, master. I can do it effortlessly, Uzumaki said. Naruto gave a wide grin. He then nodded. Sasuke and Sakura turned back to Kakashi for some confirmation. Kakashi looked at Uzumaki and then at Fu. Well, I don't see any problems with it. Plus we can have an extra pair of eyes and ears. We'll leave to Naruto for now, Kakashi said. Naruto nodded with a large grin. Master, Fu said. Naruto swiftly turned around and noticed Fu looking at the ground. May I have my hands back, master? Fu asked. Naruto glanced down and noticed his hands still held to Fu's hands. A small pine tint flew to his cheeks. Sorry. Naruto dropped his hands. Fu didn't really pay it any mind anymore. Her master's hands were warm, surprisingly. Slowly the entire group began to fall asleep save for Naruto, Gaara, and Uzumaki. Uzumaki quickly got to work on spreading out some of her insects. With any luck she might be able to actually grab some desert insects from this place if her master allowed. Naruto and Uzumaki watched as the insects burrowed into the ground. No doubt some of them would die from the sand, but Uzumaki hoped that Naruto would let her cultivate some more. Actually, come to think of it, her hive was back in Iowa. Oh joy. Master, I don't suppose that your apartment allows for specific pets, does it? Uzumaki asked as she looked at the moonlit sky. Not a cloud was to be seen. Naruto glanced at Uzumaki for a moment before he registered her question. Pets? Besides dogs, cats, and maybe a fish tank, then I don't think so. Why? You want to buy a pet? Naruto asked. The fact that her master was so serious in that question was the only reason Uzumaki didn't laugh outright at it. She merely cleared her throat. Master, you once made a distinction between my clan and the Aburame clan. It's not a far-off comparison, and though I hate their clan, I still respect what they do. That said, master, how do you think your classmate, Shino, gets his insects? Uzumaki asked. Naruto folded his arms and frowned. Well, he grows them, right? It's the one thing the guy never stops talking about. His family has like a ton of bugs, right? I think he said something about a hive or something like that, Naruto said. Uzumaki nodded, and she didn't really expect her master to know much about entomology. He didn't seem like the type. That's right, master. Normally our clans children are introduced to insects at a young age. The hive is not only meant for the insects, but it's also to familiarize the insects with our chakra so that they know our body is not only safe to use, but also capable of commanding them. I have a limited number right now. Not just from my failed mission, but also because our clan's hive is back in Iwagakure, XSuzumebachi said solemnly. It hadn't taken Naruto very long to put two and two together, even if he might have been lost in some of the explanation. Oh, you need a hive for your insects to work right. That's why you asked me, Naruto said. XSuzumebachi only nodded while Naruto scratched his scalp. A hive, He knew that without a doubt a hive wasn't going to be permitted by his apartment. Not that Naruto knew how to operate such things in the first place. That said, he possibly could always go to Shino for some help or information. Bug Boy always did come in handy during those types of situations. Then again, Naruto knew his landlord wouldn't accept Suzumebachi's suggestion. That would mean he would have to buy a house, and not just any house, but one with a decent amount of space. Naruto wasn't exactly sure how big a hive was supposed to be, but considering just Suzumebachi, and perhaps Fu, then it could have been better. A house. Even with that other guy's money, I don't think I can pay for a house just yet. Not to mention the other payments I might have to make. A house is more than an apartment, but I guess I wouldn't have to worry about asshole neighbors anymore, Naruto thought to himself. That was honestly one of the best pros to cons he actually had in his mind at the moment. Suzumebachi merely watched Naruto have his thoughts. She wondered what he was thinking. Given her limited introduction into the world of slaves and slave trade, she knew that Naruto was perhaps the biggest unknown she had ever had as master, or what she was told what a master was, or how a master was defined. Granted, despite Naruto's best efforts, Suzumebachi didn't feel as free to speak her mind as Naruto would have liked, but she knew that she would have disappointed him if she weren't honest. Now, one might be wondering, what would Suzumebachi care if she wasn't honest with someone who essentially held her life in the balance of death and life? Well, she would explain it to be all intuition. If Naruto felt that she should speak a part of her mind, then those were his orders. She would follow his orders as a slave did for the master. Suzumebachi was sure that Fu felt the same way. I get what you're saying, Dadbao, but between the three of us, I don't have enough for another place to live right now. I guess I could discuss something with Gigi when I get back, but I don't think I can get one right now. Though, that might be different in a couple of months, ya know, Naruto said. Suzumebachi nodded. She knew it was a tall issue to fill at best. I guess that wouldn't stop me from looking around though, Naruto later added. Suzumebachi glanced at him and took note of the bright smile on her master's face. It wasn't difficult to not share in his joy. But I don't get it. You guys talk about losing your bugs and all that, but what's the problem? Can't you just go out and get more? What do you need a hive for? Naruto asked. Suzumebachi slowly smiled. It's not as simple as you believe, master. Insects, while abundant, do not all fall into the same category. There are endangered species of insects as well. Some help heal injuries faster, some deal poison better, others help replenish chakra faster. Every insect species is different in some way. Also, master, it's not just about fighting with them, but also about helping to breed them as well, Suzumebachi said. Naruto seemed confused, so Suzumebachi clarified. Like master, take for instance, if your chakra was more potent than my chakra. If you outwardly expressed that chakra, by which I mean unleashed it, then I believe the insects around you would naturally die from being unable to handle your chakra. But if you knew this beforehand and gathered a couple of insects, let's say ants for example, and constantly fed them a fixed amount of your chakra, then naturally the first generation isn't going to fare well. They grew up not knowing about it, but when they breed, then their children will have better adapted to it. An insect's lifespan can either be very short or very long depending on factors, but master, if you keep breeding them while giving them samples of your potent chakra, then naturally the ants would have a generation that would use to your chakra, had items in their systems that could handle it, and make use of it. That is why, just gathering insects doesn't work, Suzumebachi said before giving a small breath. Naruto blinked. That was a lot of technical stuff, but he didn't want Suzumebachi to think he was being too stupid, so he thought it over as best he could. So, you guys can't just get any insects because they won't like your chakra, but you get them to have kids and those kids down the line can do it since they grew up on your chakra. Something like that? Naruto asked. Uzumaki quickly nodded. Hi, that I one of the purposes of a hive. To have over thousands of these types to call upon at a moment's notice. It's not just taking about 10 or 20 of them, Uzumaki said. Naruto definitely have to give Shino's clan, or at least their insects, credit. They really were tougher than he had imagined for the little creeps they were. Well, I don't think I can get a house right now, but I'll see what Gigi can do for us. He's never let me down before, Naruto said. Uzumaki just nodded as the two kept watch into the night. Well, technically 3 since Gaara was awake as well, but for some reason the redhead was always awake. 1 hour and 30 minutes passed by slowly as Naruto kicked his feet in the sand. Uzumaki stood at his side, checking in with her insects every now and then. She honestly lost more than she was anticipating to the desert, but she hoped this number would be replaced in the future. Meanwhile, Naruto stared at Gaara. He couldn't place this foreboding feeling. Naruto had met quite a few killers in his life, not counting the villagers on certain days, but he felt he was a bit more adjusted to killing pressure than the average genin. There was the pressure from Mizuki, there was the pressure from Zabuza, there was the pressure from Haku, there was the pressure from Suion back in Tokigakure, but this Gaara guy radiated type of pressure altogether. He was just sitting there, unmoving, uncaring, like a live statue in the desert. His eyes gazed out into the desert. Honestly, if Naruto hadn't seen the boy moving earlier he would have thought the guy was dead. Naruto hadn't been sure how long he was staring, but he soon found his eyes face to face with the eyes of Gaara. The boy stared at him, unblinking. You have been staring at me. Why? Gaara asked in a low tone. Naruto blinked and scratched his cheek. This pulled Uzumaki from her own private wonderings. Well, you have that gloomy look on your face, you haven't said anything to either of us for the past hour and you have moved about as much as the sand out here. I almost thought you died from a heart attack or something, Naruto said. Even he admitted, at least to himself, that was rather childish of him, but if you didn't like Uzumaki Naruto then you could get the out. Uzumaki hid a grin behind her face. She wouldn't say it, but she had the same thoughts as her master. At the same time, Gaara just looked at Naruto for a moment. Kill me. There is nothing here that can kill me. If I did then my existence will be erased. I will be nothing. There will be no worth in my existence. Perhaps I should kill you both to prove my existence, Gaara said. Uzumaki widened her eyes and turned in shock. Did he really just threaten them both, with their comrades, there, being her masters, a short ways away? Either this guy was oddly confident, oddly stupid, or oddly insane. Hell, he could have been all three. Naruto dropped the smile on his face. He hadn't heard wrong. He frowned as Gaara looked at them. Naruto was already on guard as he positioned himself in front of Uzumaki. So I was right. Back in the Cage mansion, you threatened your teammate. You threatened that mascara bastard, when you said you would kill him, Naruto pointed out. Gaara turned a light glance to Kankuro, who was sleeping, before the redhead looked back at Naruto. His life is no consequence of mine, just as yours isn't. Mother has been concerned about you, even more than the Uchiha, Gaara said. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Mother? Who the hell was that supposed to be? Did someone back in Sunagakure talk to Gaara? His mother, like he had spoken about. Naruto doubted it. He didn't know how things went in Sunagakure, but he thought he would have maybe seen at least some instance of the Cage's wife during any of his time in Suna. He wasn't sure. Nonetheless, this guy was dangerous. You'd betray your own teammates. What the hell's wrong with you? Naruto asked lowly. Though Sasuke, Sakura, and Kakashi pissed him off a lot, he didn't think he could ever truly bring himself to betray them. He wasn't sure he could say the same for them. Nothing is wrong about killing those who have attempted to take your life over 1,000 times. It is easy enough to kill them before they can end my existence. Why should I worry about someone else's life when they don't worry about mine? Gaara asked. Naruto paused. His teammates had tried to kill him over 1,000 times. No way. There was no way that just 3 people could have tried to do that. Was he talking about his village? If he was then, the thought chilled Naruto because Naruto understood assassination attempts. He sounds like me almost, Naruto thought to himself. Don't think I'm going to let you hurt Uzumaki-san while I'm here. I don't care what kind of life you've lived. You're not going to threaten her. Naruto proclaimed. Gaara could have sworn he heard a snarl in Naruto's voice, but he felt it was entirely within his notice. He watched Naruto proudly place his body in front of Uzumaki. The former Iwa Kunoichi expressed surprise. Gaara didn't know why this act made him angry. Gaara grunted as his head began to throb. He clutched the sides of his head. No. No, don't be angry, mother. Yes, I understand, Gaara said to himself. Naruto wasn't sure, but he didn't like this feeling in the air. He also didn't like the look in Gaara's eyes. Naruto slowly took out a kunai. Uzumaki, if he attacks, I'll hold him off. You wake up Kakashi-sensei, got it? Naruto asked. Uzumaki would have liked to argue, but the words didn't leave her throat. You would protect her. So if I kill her, then you have lost your reason for existing. If that is what it takes, Gaara said as he slowly stood to his feet. His imposing figure gleamed in the moonlight. Naruto quickly stood up and blocked Uzumaki with his body. However, neither Naruto nor Uzumaki noticed the sand behind them begin to form. Slowly it crept into the air before forming into large spike aimed directly for Uzumbaki's backside. Naruto and Uzumaki kept their eyes on Gaara as the redhead looked at them. Make me feel alive, Gaara said as the sand spike rolled back. Naruto tightened his grip on his kunai while Uzumaki quickly prepared to jump away. Enjoying your shift, Naruto? Gaara. Naruto and Uzumaki glanced to the left and noticed Kakashi came up from a part of rock with that same eye smile of his. Naruto had never been more joyed to see his sensei than right now. Unknowingly, the sand spike fell back into the sand without any noise being made. Naruto relaxed and withdrew his kunai. Not really, Naruto said with a light glare towards Gaara, who was now looking to the side. Kakashi glanced between Gaara and Naruto before he nodded. Well, that's understandable. I'm here to relieve you and Uzumaki-san. You both can rest now, Kakashi said. He turned to look at Gaara and watched the young boy take a seat back on the rock. Naruto released a sigh while Uzumaki recalled her insects, though she hadn't exactly had many to begin with. They were drones at best. She had managed to secure a few before being captured, but it was nothing compared to what she used to have. Gotcha, sensei, Naruto said as he helped Uzumaki to her feet and the two quickly collected their things. Naruto watched Uzumaki walk out of view before he turned to Kakashi. Kakashi-sensei, watch that Gaara guy. He's dangerous, Dadbeo, Naruto remarked. Kakashi seemed surprised by Naruto's statement. So, that pressure that had woken him up had been from the redhead. It looked like Suna were also the ones keeping secrets. I'll be sure to keep myself protected, Naruto. Thanks for the warning, Kakashi waved as Naruto nodded and went back to the sleeping area. Kakashi quickly sat himself on top of the rock and looked at the moon, which effectively started his shift. Meanwhile, Naruto hadn't gotten much sleep, too busy thinking into the night. The next morning was a quiet affair. Naruto gave a hard yawn which showed just how exhausted he was from last night. Nightmares, loser? Sasuke asked with a small smirk. Naruto gave a light growl. Not in the mood, Tem, Naruto edged out. Fu turned to Uzumaki for some type of explanation. Uzumaki, with Naruto's permission, had told Fu that she would explain it all at a later date, which Fu was fine with. In the meantime, Naruto had helped himself to some tea that Uzumaki had made for him. It was as delicious as the tea he had last time, but at least it helped wake him up. Naruto took a glance up to Gaara. He noticed the redhead's teammates gave him a widened berth than Naruto had seen before. Apparently last night hadn't affected just Naruto or Uzumaki. Well, forgive Naruto if he wasn't too keen on talking with Gaara at the moment. Well, I suppose this is as good a time as any, Kakashi said, which brought his team to attention. Uzumaki and Fu blinked from their thoughts when Kakashi cleared his throat. Good a time as any for what, sensei? Sakura asked rather tiredly. The heat had a way of draining you before you even realized it. Kakashi looked at his sweating students and smiled. Sasuke raised an eyebrow, as did Naruto. Well, I think that after this rather extended vacation that the Sandaime has given us, then I think now is the time that we get back to training, Kakashi said. Not even his eye smile could compare to the upward curve of his lips through his mask. Uzumaki and xFū grimaced for their master as Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura gawked at their sensei. The man had the gall to suggest training now. In this heat. Did he want them to die? Oh, if Kakashi could take a picture of their faces and frame it on the wall, then by the laws of God he would. However, that would have to come later. Now, I know it's hot, but this is the perfect environment for this training as well as for your future training. We wouldn't want the other teams showing us up now, would we? Kakashi asked. Naruto and Sasuke growled at the thought. Sakura didn't specifically care either way, but it made Sasuke happy. And just what are you going to teach us? How to stand on quicksand? Sasuke asked. Sensing the sarcasm, Kakashi almost hated to ruin it. No, silly. That's for when you have mastered water walking, Kakashi said. The rest of his team stopped. Uzumaki and xFū widened their eyes. Their master didn't even know water walking. Ma, I wasn't planning on introducing you three to that until you got back to the village. Sorry if the desert isn't the best place to do water walking, Kakashi grinned. Naruto sent a glance to Uzumaki. He could do it. He could so do it. He wanted to do it. Naruto looked down and took a deep breath. It was too hot to be jumping up in anger, though he had to restrain himself to not do so. Just tell us what we're doing already, Naruto pleaded with his patience quickly leaving him. Kakashi pouted, but he merely nodded and quickly took out 3 slips of paper. Kakashi handed each to the 3. They took them. We're learning origami, Naruto asked. Now that got a stifled laugh from xFū, though she did her best to cover it. Kakashi quickly pointed to the 3 of them. What you have there is chakra paper. We're going to be getting into your elemental affinities, Kakashi said. Of course his students had confused looks on their faces. Because, why not? Our affinities. What do you mean? Sakura asked. Kakashi sighed before he went into lecture mode. Oh well, it helped pass the time. An elemental affinity, Sakura, is which of the elements your chakra identifies with the most. You both remember the 5 jutsu affinities, correct? Wind, water, earth, fire, and lighting. Each of you has an affinity towards one of these. For example, take Sasuke's clan. The Uchiha clan were predominantly the best Kaden users. They inspired some of the best fire techniques in shinobi history, so it would stand to reason that Sasuke would have an affinity towards fire. It's something like that, Kakashi said. And the paper? Sasuke asked. Kakashi looked at his students a little disappointed. Surely they could have figured it out by now. The paper is special because if you channel your chakra into it, then it will tell what your affinity is. If it's water, then the paper will get moist. If it fire, it will. You know what? Just channel your chakra and take a guess. I'll tell you if you're right, Kakashi said. He had given this explanation to too many people in his life. He was tired of doing it over and over. Naruto, Sasuke and Sakura looked down at their pieces of paper. Sasuke gave a grunt before he channeled his chakra into his paper. It bursted into flames. This more than likely meant that Sasuke got his family's affinity. However, from most of the ashes, Sasuke noticed bits and pieces of the paper crinkle up. Sasuke blinked. I'm guessing I have fire, but why are these burnt pieces crinkled? Sasuke asked. Kakashi looked down and smiled. Well, it appears that in addition to your family's fire affinity, you also have a lightning affinity. While it's not out of the ordinary for a shinobi to have more than one affinity, it's not exactly common either. Not bad, Sasuke, Kakashi said. Sasuke gave a light smirk to his face at the news. Sakura didn't waste any time and quickly performed her own action. Everyone watched the paper turn to dust and dirt. Earth for me then? Sakura asked. Kakashi wasn't entirely surprised by that given how hard-headed, how into herself Sakura could be sometimes. She really was a scary individual when one thought about it. That's right, Sakura. A solid choice. Earth is the one with the most stable strengths, Kakashi said. Sakura nodded with a light smile. Pretty soon, everyone watched as Naruto held up his piece of paper. He quickly channeled his chakra into his piece of paper. Everyone waited for something to happen. Moments passed by as the piece of paper remained in one piece. Nothing's happening, Sakura said, stating the obvious. Naruto looked at the piece of paper for a couple of moments. So, the Dobi doesn't have an affinity? Sasuke asked. Naruto gave a low growl before he gripped the piece of paper harder between his thumb and forefinger. His eyes were practically begging for anything to happen. Everyone watched, hoping for something to be different. Kakashi looked at the piece of paper. Always had to be Naruto that was the single one out. Nothing could ever be normal for the genin. Everyone has an affinity, Sasuke. Though, I will admit that this is odd. Are you sure you're channeling your chakra, Naruto? Kakashi asked. Naruto's eyebrow twitched. I'm sure I would know, Kakashi-sensei, Naruto growled. Kakashi would have mistaken Naruto for having a Kaden affinity from the look on his face. It was like he was trying to turn the paper into ash. So why isn't this working? I even did the same tree exercise. I should have no problem doing something like this. Naruto said, irritated. Maybe Sasuke-kun's right. Maybe Naruto really doesn't have an affinity. It could be the only explanation, Sakura said. Kakashi didn't buy it. That went against every logic that stood on ground in the elemental nations. Even civilians were attuned to at least one affinity. All of the other Jinchuriki were attuned to affinities as well. There was no reason that Naruto could have been different. Master, perhaps you should take a break. It wouldn't do you any good to strain in the heat, Fu said out. Naruto stopped his glare on the paper. He looked at Fu and noticed her holding out her water bottle. At that time, Naruto could feel the sweat drop from his face. He softened. He didn't want to make Fu uncomfortable. He smiled. Arigato, Fu, Naruto said, taking the water bottle. He took a quick drink before refreshing himself. Naruto gave Fu the bottle before he held up the piece of paper. Well, you can always try again later, Naruto. For now, I'll begin with Sasuke and Sakura in telling you about your elements and the jutsu that I can teach you, Kakashi said. Naruto held his head down, but nodded. Fu felt for her master. She didn't know what it was like. Honestly, neither did Uzumaki. Everyone had an affinity. Her master's Jonin sensei wasn't wrong in that regard. So she couldn't understand what happened to her master. She didn't get it. I guess there are more people in the world than I thought, Uzumaki muttered to herself. The whole day was trying on Naruto's attitude. Fu and Uzumaki did what they could to help him, but they could see it wasn't having the best effect on him as they watched Kakashi teach Sasuke the hand signs for a fire technique while taught Sakura the technique for an earth jutsu. The attitude of the Suna team wasn't exactly helping. Baki had told for Naruto to take point and scout ahead while the others relaxed. Naruto didn't act on his nerve to tell the other Jonin to off. He just stomped off away from everyone. When Temari had asked about what sand had gotten into Naruto's pants, Sakura hadn't made the situation much better with tell them that Naruto had no affinity to the 5 elemental natures. It had Kakashi wishing that Sakura wouldn't divulge secrets and weaknesses about their own team to potential threats, but it had been done. This news had Kankuro laughing up a storm. Fu hadn't liked it. She sure as hell didn't like her situation, but Fu knew when to be grateful. Naruto was a good thing that could have been had in a bad situation, and watching someone make fun of him, it didn't settle with Fu. Especially since she knew what it was like. Fu was about to open her mouth, but a hand from Uzumaki had stopped her. Uzumaki had reminded Fu of their place in this. Fu had to just grit her teeth and bear it. Their master's problems were not their problems. Fu looked at Uzumaki in surprise. She just sat down and settled for snarling to herself. This continued through into the night until they settled for camp. It was now Gaara and Sasuke's turn. Fu tossed and turned. She couldn't sleep. She felt bad. Fu had always been teased in her life. She had always had people whisper behind her back. She also had no one stick up for her when she would have liked for someone to. Right now, she felt just like those people did. Naruto. She didn't know what she was supposed to say. He was a good guy, if a little overeager sometimes, but he was a good person nonetheless. He was at least 20 times the support she ever had from anyone as compared to Taki. For all the good things Naruto had done for them, Fu had done nothing, but watched as her master got mocked. Well, what should she care? It wasn't like she was happy to have a master in the first place. If Naruto didn't find a need to retort, then why should she do it? Sigh. That's not it, SSU. Fu shouted mentally as she leaned up from her sleeping bag. She did care. She couldn't not care. It wasn't fair that she and Uzumaki got to be comforted and they couldn't even defend someone who did the same for them. Naruto barked in front of a cage of all people. What was a measly genin? Naruto always told them that they could speak their minds. Fu leaned up and turned over. Master. Master. Are you awake? Fu asked. She turned and blinked. Naruto's sleeping bag was empty. Fu got out of her bag and stood to her feet. She made careful steps through the camp. She could see Sakura and Uzumaki sleeping. She could also see Kakashi, Baki, Temari, and Kankuro resting. The whole camp was resting. Just over a sand dune, Fu was sure that Gaara and Sasuke were guarding the group. Fu quickly moved from the camp. Her shoes touched the hot sand. Sheesh, even in the night it was hot outside. Master? Fu asked. She walked a fair ways from the group and climbed up a sand dune. She looked into the sandy horizon. The night moon shined in the sky. Why did her master have to be so difficult? Fu sighed. She quickly slid down the sand dune. Kami. She hoped she wouldn't get lost. Baka master. Fu figured she was probably a good 10, perhaps 20 minutes away from the campsite before she heard sounds. Kuso. Why won't you work? Fu heard a grunt. She looked down the sand dune she was on and noticed the sight of her master, grunting as he held the piece of paper that Kakashi had given them. Master. Fu thought. Whatever anger was in her body had slowly fallen as she watched Naruto attempt to find his elemental affinity. She frowned as she watched Naruto's sweat pour into the sand. After some time, Naruto snarled. Kuso. Naruto shouted as he crunched up the paper into a ball and flung it into the sand. Why? Why is it always me? Why am I always the one who has this problem? Why am I always the mess up? Why does anything wrong always happen to me? What the hell did I do to deserve any of this? Sasuke gets a cool affinity and even Sakura gets one. Why can't I have one? What do they have that I don't have? Naruto asked at nothing. He huffed into the hot night. His fingers grasped at the sand in the desert. He closed his eyes tightly. Goddamn sweat got in them. Master. Naruto widened his eyes and turned around to see Fu slowly sliding down the sand dune. He shivered. He hadn't been expecting any company. Fu. What are you doing here? You should be sleeping, Naruto said. Fu couldn't help a slight giggle. The same goes to you, master, Fu said before her smile slipped. Naruto noticed her smile slip and sighed. You heard that, didn't you? Naruto asked. Naruto always said that there was to be honesty between them, so, Fu nodded. Hi. Please don't be upset, Master SSU. I saw you were gone and just went looking for you, Fu said. Naruto chuckled as he rubbed the back of his head. He watched Fu walk over to the slip of paper. She picked up the ball and unfurled it. One more time, Master, Fu said, handing him the paper slip. Naruto looked at the paper and then at Fu. One more time. What do you think I've been doing out here for the last half an hour, Fu? I've been doing this over and over without any results, Datbeo. Naruto said. Fu slowly knelt down and grabbed her master's hand. She opened it and placed the slip inside. Naruto gazed at Fu's hands. They were warm and soft. He looked up and he stared into Fu's eyes. One more time, Master. When that puppet guy on the Suna team laughed at you, I did nothing. I said nothing. I never imagined how hurt you could have been from it, SSU, Fu said. Naruto didn't speak. He just looked at the paper and sighed. For me, Master. You looked cool when you stood up to the cage. I would like it if you looked cool again, Fu stuttered. She didn't know why she stuttered, but she didn't like seeing Naruto sad. It reminded her too much of herself. Plus, she liked his smile. Naruto held the piece of paper before he channeled his chakra into it once more. Naruto could feel his chakra leaving him. He knew he was channeling it right. Yet, the paper still did nothing. A soft breeze in the wind was his reply. A couple of seconds passed as Naruto sighed hardly. It isn't. Naruto didn't get a chance to speak further before he noticed Fu gently place her hand over his own. One more time, Master. Please, Fu said. Naruto looked at her. Don't think about your past failures, SSU. Focus on something else. Focus on something that makes you happy, SSU. Get your mind off what happened this morning and just now. I want to see the cool Master SSU, Fu said. Naruto thinned his lips. He looked down at the piece of paper and released a sigh. I don't know, Fu. I get what you're saying, but I don't. Naruto glanced down and noticed Fu's hand tighten. I believe in you, master, Fu said. Naruto stilled. Someone believed in him. Naruto looked at the ground. For a long time, he had always wanted to hear those words. He always wanted to hear just a couple of words of encouragement. Growing up, he hardly ever got those words. He only got them from a handful of people. He could list those people too. Iruka, Ayame, Tsuki, the Sandaime, and perhaps Konohamaru and his friends. That was all Naruto ever got. Sakura always doubted him, Sasuke always mocked him, and Kakashi never took him seriously. Don't get him wrong, he always loved those shocked expressions on Sakura's face when he surprised her by doing what she said he couldn't, but was some encouragement really so hard to give? Apparently for Fu, it wasn't. Thank you, Fu, Naruto said. He took a calming breath and channeled his chakra into the piece of paper. Nothing happened for a moment, but Naruto didn't fight about it. He just thought of something that made him happy. He thought of those talks with the Sandaime, he thought about having lunch at Ichiraku Ramen. Having fun with Shikamaru, Kiba, and Choji. He thought about when he, Fu, and Uzumaki laughed at the dinner table. The soft breeze in the desert suddenly got stronger. Naruto and Fu looked up in surprise as a large wind came over the desert. The sand picked up in an instant. Naruto quickly grabbed Fu's hand. A sandstorm? Naruto questioned. Fu and Naruto squinted their eyes. Even as the wind and sand blew over them, Fu looked at the piece of paper and gasped. Master, look, Fu said. Naruto turned back to the piece of paper and gasped. It was glowing. What the hell did that mean? The paper glowed brightly in the sandstorm. Its light pierced the heart of the storm. Suddenly the wind gathered around Naruto and Fu. It protected them and pushed the sand away, even as the paper glowed. Naruto and Fu stared in awe before the light somehow attached itself to the wind and began to spin wildly. Master, I think you can stop now, Fu said. Naruto quickly felt the sand beneath his feet shift. I don't know how, Naruto said. Fu and Naruto gasped. Naruto quickly grabbed Fu and covered her body with his own. The sand dunes shifted about violently, sinking their feet into the desert. The glow of the paper seemed even brighter even as it sliced in half down the middle. However, each side of the split piece of paper was glowing brightly like a light in a world of darkness. Master! Fu screamed. Naruto growled as waves of sand pushed into the air before they splashed down over Fu and Naruto covered them entirely. The light vanished and the wind calmed down. The sands remained untouched, telling no tales of what had just transpired. On a sand dune, far away, a figure had watched the action transpire. Their face was entirely covered. It is done, Kage-sama, the figure said in thought before moving. Now, they had to get to the town that the others were going to before they got there. The figure vanished away. The desert was still. There was nothing to be seen for miles on end. It all seemed untouched. There would be chaos the following morning.